All right, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to go ahead and start our public meeting. We do have a need for a closed session this evening, so I would be willing to entertain a motion to enter closed session.
I move that we go into closed session for the purpose of discussing litigation.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote starting with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and clear the room and wait for the heads up from Sam about our YouTube.
It really was.
Short and sweet.
Short and to the point.
A few more where
for students that may not be able to travel to a school, might have a physical or mental disability that makes a traditional school environment difficult for them. And it's also equitable from an employment standpoint, where there may be a teacher or other employees that help teachers that the physical school environment may not be the best for them. An example would be immunocompromised or people with mobility issues. So, and then moving in, I kind of touched on transportation. That's back on my list there, that just easier for people. And then there's it's also equitable, kind of the same topic as safety. A lot of parents are really nervous about having their students in school. I understand the statistics say otherwise, but still, it's important for parents to feel comfortable where their students are. They know their
That's
homework
time.
could be already time. 3 minutes.
Goes by quick. Thank you,
That's all right.
Abraham, for joining us, and
Yeah.
please feel free to send your rest of your comments to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our second request to speak is Dan Steenblick. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for joining us.
Hello there, I'm Dan Steenblick, a resident of Salt Lake City in the Fair Park area and third generation West High alum. In the 1920 Red and Black yearbook, the students stated the new West High building would be one of the finest in the West, even though many would never attend class in that building. In the 1922-23 school year, the first students attended the class in the building. As these first students graduated from West, in their yearbook, they created and commemorated that, and they published the following. And they said, "Who can refrain from a sensation of joy and pride as you gaze upon our magnificent new home? Something beyond imitation, a pride of having it as a background for both social and intellectual contact. Here's hoping that the future West High graduates will feel the same pride, the same jealousy towards safeguarding of our new building as we, the present seniors, the first people to have the honor of graduating from this our new home. We would be negligent if we did not also consider the input from these students who were the first to attend West, who are no longer here to add their voice, who understood its beauty and function. These students, many of whom came from meager surroundings and the challenges of youth at that time in world history, including the World War and the flu epidemic of 1918, and they felt that this new edifice to learning should be safeguarded. Many of these students may have been the first generation in their immigrant family to attend a high school, such as my grandmother who attended West. As we consider the history of Salt Lake, we may look around and be grateful for those decision makers, the position you now hold, who had foresight to save some of the historic structures which certainly had run the course of their initial lifespan. With a sense of historic preservation, they kept these buildings from being torn down completely, so we can enjoy their splendor today. These buildings have all had structural work done in order to keep them as a safe, functioning building and as a part of the skyline of the city. This includes the City and County Building, Hotel Utah, Kingsbury Hall, and the buildings in President's Circle, Capitol Theater, and others. Most of these are downtown. Very few large public historic structures exist on the west side of Salt Lake, but we can still see the 2 train depots and the buildings on the state fairgrounds. Consider the gap in our history if this gem of the west side of Salt Lake and this jewel of the Salt Lake School District are no more. By only saving about 60 feet of the front facade and placing this on the other side of the street, which it has occupied for 100 years, to me will seem like a huge loss to our collective past. Who can guarantee that this small portion of the facade would be incorporated for certain based upon what could happen during construction? I don't feel we can replace the connection which comes to those who know that their grandparents walked through the same front entrance as they, and then potentially their children, grandchildren, and other family based upon the redesign proposals of option 3 and 4. I ask you again to consider the design of the original students, or the desire of the original students in safeguarding more of the historic structure as you consider which redesign will be approved for the wonderful and safe learning environment for future generations who will be attending classes therein. Again, consider the thoughts of the first students who
Thank you,
graduate
Dan.
from
That's
West
time.
to safeguard this gem if they continue to be considered as the finest in the West and beyond imitation. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Our third request to speak is Lillian Oscarson. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, I'm Lillian Oscarson, a 7th grader from Bryant Middle School. I am here today to talk to you about an anaerobic digester. An anaerobic digester, it takes food waste and creates natural gas and fertilizer. 30% of our landfills here in Utah are food waste. Through this process of digesting, we get natural gas and fertilizer, which is, and while the food sits in the landfill, it emits greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, ammonia, and methane. Methane is 20 times more damaging to our atmosphere than CO2. Here's how it works. We separate the food waste from the trash, and then we put it into the dumpster at each school that Momentum Recycling will provide us with. And then the truck comes, picks it up, and then takes it to the place where it gets sorted. So the plastic bag that the food was put in gets taken out, cleaned, and properly taken care of. And then all the food scraps get grinded, liquefied, and screened to make sure there's no packaging left in it or anything. As long as each bag of trash is less than 8% contaminated, it can be used as food waste. And then it's heated also to have the growth of microbes. The methane that is emitted gets cleaned and is turned into natural gas, and then the rest is turned into fertilizer, and which is better for the environment than telling people, landfill, look, Great Salt Lake, landfill, new thing. When you think of school, you think of learning. Well, this is better to tell kids where all your food scraps go than saying, look kids, this is where it goes. It gets picked by a truck, goes to the landfill. Well, and so this is for $44 a month, we can help make the air cleaner and make a learning environment and help the air.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Lillian,
you.
for
Thank
joining
you.
us tonight. Before you go, we have a sustainability plan here in Salt Lake District that was led out by students. So you are carrying that torch and that precedent that was set.
Well,
so thank you for joining us.
So the paper trays at my school, if they were actual paper, they could go in the digester. Anything that's 100% recyclable can go in the digester. But those are actually made out of some sort of plastic that can't go in. It can go in the trash and then sit in the landfill for 3,000 years.
I appreciate that. And Lillian, I want Paul Schulte to raise his hand. Paul, will you connect with Lillian and get us more information about what these digesters are and have a formal presentation of the board at some point? Thank you so much. All right, up next on our request to speak is Wendy Finau. Hi, Wendy. Thank you for
Hi.
joining us. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, I thought I had 5. I'm speaking for 96.
You're speaking for a group?
Yeah, a group.
Then you would have 5 minutes, yes.
Perfect. Hello, my name is Wendy Finau, and professionally I go by my middle name, Wendy Finau. As an alumnus of West High, I graduated with the class of 96, and tonight I want to speak to options which I didn't find as I researched the plans for the future of the school building. So I ask that you consider the following to vote for option 1 with modifications. Allow me to tell you a little bit more about myself and why I'm here. My time I spent at West inspired me to stay involved not only in academics, I was also involved with prevention efforts to help students who struggled. I was a member of peer court and improvisational teen theater. In fact, the IB theater program allowed my enrollment into the school as a sophomore in 1994. In 95, as a junior, I became a student senate rep for iCare and took part in student government for the first time. I then ran and won the title of ASW historian. As a senior in September of '95, during homecoming week, I spent my time reviewing nearly 74 years of the history of the school for an ambitious self-assigned project that would serve as a slideshow review for the school's history. Yes, that's me. I also took a great deal of time in the halls and classes of the school building that week and throughout the months before my senior year and high school career ended. I learned more about who I wanted to be in the halls of that building because of the attention I paid to the details of not only what it took to build that school, I also wanted to be someone who could record the history of the school to emphasize the significance of each of the students from the classes of '96 to 2001. I'm ambitious. I'm ambitious. I am also a second-generation immigrant of a Tongan American woman and a single mom who died by suicide in 1987. Now, the reason why I tell you this is that of the volunteer work I'm now involved with, I speak to students across the Salt Lake Valley about suicide prevention and how important mental health is. What I've discovered in the last 6 years of speaking and serving students at high schools like Hunter, Cypress, and now Granger High is that I understand distinctly the value of allowing every student their space to learn and grow in an environment conducive to their needs. What are these needs? Do they really include taking a building meant to herald ideas of larger, older institutions on the East Coast down? Those are the same buildings that are still standing because of the beautiful and purposeful architecture meant to inspire learning and the love of learning. Since learning of the plans to reimagine this building, I've been following the project closely, and I do understand the challenges of renovating this building. And Preservation Utah has provided great insight into the possibility of preserving the current building and incredible reasons our community should. So Richard Moe, the former president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, stated, like individuals, a community can fall victim to amnesia, can lose the memory of what it was, and thereby lose touch with what it is and what it was meant to be. The loss of community memory happens most frequently and most dramatically in the destruction of familiar landmarks that they are themselves familiar reminders of who we were, what we believed, and where we are headed. The West High School class of 1964, Lawrence H. West became Larry H. Miller when his mother remarried in 1949. During his life, Miller set up a foundation to preserve historic buildings. Based on his philanthropic endeavors and financial support, if he were still with us, it would be a pervasive sentiment. It is a pervasive sentiment that we may not even have a discussion to rebuild, but yet to revitalize and renovate the school to its original glory with the upgrades needed for a modern-day educational institution. Preservation Utah has spoken to the sustainability of a renovation based on the idea that we are reusing current materials that option 3 would have in a landfill. 96 was a big year for the building. Back then, the student body fought to no avail to save the auditorium, and then I took pictures of the auditorium as I silently mourned the loss of what usually reminded me of a smaller version of Capitol West Theater downtown. In 97, a portion of the student body moved to a remote location until the main building was ready to host students once again. And that brings me to recall another notable alumni, Clayton Christensen, the student body president of the class of 1970. Christensen is most famously known as the author of Disruptive Innovation, a proven theory that describes the process in which a product or service takes a root in simple applications and expands to have a dramatic impact on the market, disrupting the status quo. Preservation Utah mentioned the opportunity for option 5. The students would relocate from one building to a next in every phase of the project. The proposal introduced the idea of a quad structure that also saves the main building. If we modify option 1, we can also have the students and faculty look to the community leaders, businesses, and/or alumni to help support the effort. During those 8 years, it would involve increasing a work-study program for more juniors and seniors, moving them off campus and allowing them to focus on their future as they work within the community. Freshmen, sophomores will also be hosted at a remote site if we ask the community and companies to become engaged and involved in providing space dedicated to the faculty and students of the school for the duration of the renovation. This leaves us with the LP years 7th through 8th grade. Portables would be available for them, but for only 2 years of their high school career. We could expect that 4 graduating classes would be in portables for only 2 years as we manifest a newly renovated West High, retrofitted again for the next generation of scholars and champions.
That was good.
Please say West High. I don't want to put my name and my body right in front of it, but I will.
Thank you, Wendy, for sharing your thoughts with us and for carrying on your mom's legacy. Thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate it. Our last speaker tonight is Amanda Longwell.
All right, thank you for having me. Most of you guys know me, the 2 new board members, Amanda Longwell. I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary student. My elementary student is a student with Down syndrome, and then I have ELP students. So I've got kind of the array of children and my experiences that I bring to the table. A lot of what I speak to is special education. So I look at you, Ashley, because I know the first meeting that you had something to say, you specifically spoke to students with disabilities. That was heard, that was appreciated, and it was celebrated. So thank you for recognizing that student body. Too often they're put in the, we take care of all of our students, and that gets lost in the conversation. Request to speak, I believe at some point you guys had request to speak at every board meeting, but at some point it seemed to drop off the study session meetings, which is really frustrating because there's really important stuff that's being discussed at those meetings. But then we're trying to squash in a whole lot of public speaking in one meeting per month. I would beg of you to revisit opening that public comment period at those study session meetings, please. HR reports. The last 3 months, there's minimal special education hiring, no reported para hiring, going off of conversations from the first half of the school year where we were, and I'm pretty sure still are, in a pretty catastrophic state with our special education staffing, especially our para situation. It's really frustrating to see that we're still not seeing much movement in that manner, and subsequently parents are quitting their jobs to support their kids in the school because of those voids, having to take time from their jobs to support their kids to be able to access things that basically our lives are being negatively impacted to get our kids the access that they need because of the staffing issue, aside from the education the kids aren't getting, because the whole first half of the school year so far has been crisis management in these classrooms, not meaningful academic time. I beg of you guys to revisit the para full-time thing. If your guesstimated number, the 40K for just those 20 positions was pretty par on, I assume. You're solid with your numbers, then let's do more. 40K is a drop in the bucket out of the general fund, and we need more full-time paras. The more I've talked to paras, they're like, why didn't they do that last year? Why didn't they do that before? I wouldn't have quit, I wouldn't have left. And this is actually the first year I've been in a classroom that it's got a long-term para. And the relief as a parent to know there's another person in that classroom that has longevity and experience is pretty huge. I feel like I can breathe this year. ESY, that needs to be looked at, because if we go back to a skimpy ESY schedule and not consider the fact that the kids have been deprived a lot of education, you need to look at compensatory services, please. School closures, I'll just email you on that one. I've heard West Side, we do K through 5 because they were overstaffed. And if we're redoing all of this and closing schools, look at K through 6 on the West Side, again, to kind of create that consistency district-wide.
Thank you.
And the ramifications there. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for your thoughtful comments. We'll move along to our reports section of the agenda. The first item is a legislative update. Superintendent, would you like to introduce us?
Yandri and Alan will, Yandri's coming forward and Alan will stay where he is.
A hint of Alan is how I described it earlier.
A hint of Alan.
Good evening, board members and community members behind me. What I'm passing out right now is the final version of our legislative tracker. This is what I've emailed to you every Friday, but this is the final version. You also have a PDF copy of it in your inboxes if you prefer to look on your devices. I want to start out by just thanking all of you for your involvement, for coming up to meet with legislators, for coming to the Friday meetings, for just giving your input over text, email, phone, and just generally for caring and being engaged. I feel grateful to work for a Board of Education where our leaders are involved like that. So first, just a quick overview of our bills. And Sarah, I'm so sorry I didn't ask you about, okay, thank you. Forgot to ask about where the clicker was. Okay, so this session, the legislature passed 575 bills. I tracked 111 of those, which you'll see on the tracking sheet. 61 of those actually passed, and I'm going to focus on 17 of those bills that are particularly impactful today. And I'll start by by talking about the one that took us all by surprise in the beginning, not because of it passing, but of how quickly it all happened. House Bill 215, what some affectionately are calling the voucher bill, funding for teacher salaries and optional education opportunities. What this bill does is it establishes the Utah Fits All scholarship that allows parents to obtain a scholarship for their student up to $8,000. That scholarship in the amount of $8,000 can then be spent on the education of the parents choosing for their student. It also includes a $6,000 teacher salary supplement that, after being broken down, actually is a $4,200 teacher salary supplement, with $1,800 of that going to benefits. That's an important distinction that I wanted to make sure is known, especially as you prepare for negotiations later this spring. Coupled with House Bill 215 is Senate Bill 183, Educator Salary Amendments. And the important thing that this bill does is it adds an appropriation adjustment for that educator salary adjustment and the teacher salary supplement program. This won't start until July 1st, 2024, but it basically ties it to the WPU increase. So in future years, those will increase by a percentage that is equal to the percentage of the WPU increase in that year. Did I say that correctly? Yeah. Okay. And you're going to hear from Alan after you hear from me, so he'll cover a lot of this stuff in significantly more depth. The next really big thing that happened is the Senate Joint Resolution 10. This is the resolution related to the constitutional earmark, and what this does is it puts a question on the ballot on behalf of voters to propose amending the Utah Constitution to expand that income tax earmark. As you know, a few years ago there was another constitutional amendment that expanded that to be tied not just for education expenses, but also for expenses for children and for people with disabilities in the state of Utah. So this would expand it even more. And again, this doesn't pass that right straight off. It puts it in front of the voters in 2024, and it would go into effect January 1st, 2025. So we still have one more legislative session and quite a bit of time where things could change. Feel free to interrupt at any point if you have questions, by the way. Okay. Most of the bills that I'm talking about today, 15 of the 17, are bills that passed. I wanted to flag 2 bills that did not pass. The first one being House Bill 175, related to school fees. And this bill, the idea behind it has come up the last 3, possibly 4, if I'm remembering correctly, I think 3 legislative sessions. We'll likely see it again. The basic premise is that we would remove school fees so that public education really is a free education for all students. The problem with the bill year after year is that it hasn't come with funding to be able to do that, and without a fiscal note, that would become really challenging for school districts across the state to implement. This bill did not pass. We waited to see what would happen until the last day of the session, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that it didn't pass. So I know we have school fees hearings twice this month, including tonight, and I just wanted you to know that this particular bill did not pass. Okay, and then just a summary of funding. There's a 6% WPU increase. You are going to hear a lot of other numbers. You're going to hear 18.5%. You're going to hear some legislators saying 20%. Just know that the WPU increase was actually 6%. Those other numbers, I think they get to by adding all the other things they added to education, the one-time expenses and appropriations, and they give that equivalent number. Just know 6% WPU, that's what we're looking at. There was also an increase in the at-risk students WPU weighting, and the impact for us, still TBD. So Alan's going to come back to you with more details on that when he's got the final numbers. In the category of board governance, I want to...
Yandri?
Yeah.
WPU, I'm sure a lot of people do not know what the acronym of that.
Thank you. That's a great question. The WPU stands for the Weighted Pupil Unit. It's the basic unit of funding. It's essentially how much money the state of Utah allocates for each student. And then there are other add-on items that are given to school districts depending on their specific needs, but WPU is just that basic unit of funding for every student in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bade, for that question. So Senate Bill 227, School Board Ethics Complaint Investigation Requirements. Essentially, this bill creates a path for a member of the community to bring an ethics complaint against a school board member. There previously wasn't a a mechanism to really do that. And those complaints for violations of the State Ethics Act would go before the Political Subdivision's Ethics Review Commission. House Bill 308. This is a really important bill, school grading modifications. For years, public education community has wanted the removal of the lettered grades to schools. This year, that has finally happened. But what still remains is the online dashboard that will still be helpful to parents. So parents will still be able to see the gross scores for their student school. They'll be able to see the proficiency end of level assessment information. So they can still know what's happening in their child's school. They can still have that valuable information as they're making decisions on where to send their child to school. But that lettered grade, which didn't provide the broader context of the incredible work happening in many of our schools, will be gone. So that's a really positive change. In the curriculum and instruction category, the first one I want to flag is House Bill 477, full day kindergarten amendments. As you know, because of the commitment of our board, students across our city have already had access to full day kindergarten for quite some time, but this bill provides additional funding, which means that we can expand that in our remaining half-day kinder classes. The bill does also require that there still be a half-day kinder option available, so parents do still have that flexibility if that is the best choice for their child. But this bill is really going to provide that opportunity for kids across the state to have access to full-day kinder wherever they live in the state. House Bill 465, Public School Library Transparency Amendments. What this bill does is it requires us to provide an online platform for parents so that they can see what books their students are checking out of our school libraries. That can be a platform that we currently use. We can go out and get a different platform, but that is the basic premise. And for a district the size of ours, that has to be in place no later than August 1st of 2024. So it gives LEAs a year to figure out how to do that. House Bill 427 is a really concerning bill that I wanted to flag. It's called Individual Freedom in Public Education. The goal of the bill is to make sure that all instructional materials are in line with the principles of inalienable rights, equal opportunity, and individual merit. And this sounds very positive. Some of the language in this bill is found in our nation's founding documents, which is very important. But in the bill, there is a section that talks about protected categories against which you can't discriminate. One thing that was left off was gender identity, and leaving that off means that this bill is not in line with the state anti-discrimination statute, which is concerning and problematic. Our Salt Lake senators, Senator Plum, Senator Scamilla, fought really hard on the floor of the Senate to amend this bill to include that language, but that amendment failed. The sponsor didn't consider it a friendly amendment. And my hope is actually to reach out to Governor Cox to encourage him to veto this bill, because with something like this, it's not even in line with our state, with what's currently in state code. And offering that protection to all of our children is incredibly important. In the curriculum category, there was another bill that did not pass that I wanted to flag. This is one that we were concerned about, that we saw like 8 different substitutes of throughout the session. House Bill 464, School Materials Amendments. This is Representative Ivory's follow-up to his bill from last year. And the goal is to make sure that kids don't have access to pornographic materials, which is a goal that all of us support. But we already have mechanisms in place to do that, and this bill would have made it just more cumbersome and really difficult for LEAs and for educators to implement. And this is a goal that we all have, that we're already doing. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew that this bill did not pass. There were a few mental health issues that you'll see in the tracking sheet, but one I wanted to flag that was sponsored by our Salt Lake reps is House Bill 481, Safe Storage of Firearms Education Requirements. This bill requires us, when a student expresses thoughts of suicidal ideation or something concerning like that, it requires us, in the resources that we provide to the student and to their families, to also include information on safe storage of firearms. That is a really important piece of information to provide to families, and just gives us just one more tool to be able to support our students and families. In school safety, House Bill 61 is the big one, school safety requirements. It comes with a lot of money, and it does a few things. First thing it does is it creates a state security chief in the Department of Public Safety, and requires a lot of collaboration among county sheriffs across the state. It creates a school security task force, And part of the work that they're going to do is to create the duties and the scope of authority of this state security chief. It requires the state board to go out for RFP for a firearms detection vendor, firearms software detection vendor, and allows LEAs across the state to enter into contracts with that vendor, with whoever that might be. And then it makes some changes to SRO contracts, to the way that SROs handle specific student offenses. And again, the big thing is it comes with a lot of money. $75 million one time to the state board from the income tax fund, and then additionally from that another $3.6 million from the income tax fund, and $283,000 to the Department of Public Safety to administer that new position in that school security task force. So lots of money for school safety, essentially. House Bill 304, juvenile justice revisions. This bill was also really important. A lot of you are probably familiar with House Bill 239 from like 6 or 7 sessions ago. And that bill provided a lot of really important changes in terms of restorative justice and how we administer student discipline. It did create some unintended consequences and left a lot of our administrators without a lot of teeth to do things that really support our students. And this bill takes us to a place that's a little bit more in the middle. You may hear a lot of people talking about how it might take us back to the pre-HB 39 days, but the changes in this bill are positive and will give our administrators additional tools to support our students. And now I have a category called students. Senate Bill 103, these two bills are positive ones. Student graduation attire modifications. There were actually 3 or 4 different bills in this session that attempted to accomplish the same thing, but this just codifies what we already do, and that is to allow the wearing of religious or culturally significant attire at our high school graduations, which is a really positive change. House Bill 163 also relates to attire worn by students, and this is for student athletes. It protects their ability for students to wear religious attire or to modify uniforms to be in line with their beliefs regarding their faith, their modesty, and allows for that cost to be covered by LEAs rather than the student. So again, another positive change. I've kind of breezed through these because I know we've got a lot on the agenda today, but that is the last bill that I had flagged. What questions do you have for me? Or Alan? Board Member Anderson.
I have one about HB 400, which was school absenteeism amendments. So you noted that it passed, and one thing I hear about a lot is school-aged kids who are not in school, who are in public causing mischief, but they're not students, they're not enrolled. And so I wondered if, I didn't listen to the debate on this, but I'm wondering if Representative Johnson or Senator Milner directed anything as part of that bill about truancy. Because if they want the district to implement what they're calling evidence-based strategies to reduce student absenteeism, it seems like reporting truancy would be the #1 thing we could do, which we're legally prevented from doing. So I'm just curious if there was debate about that, or this changed truancy reporting in any way that we should know about.
I'll go back through my notes. I don't recall off the top of my head.
And you
what
definitely,
that debate.
yeah.
Yeah, but I will follow up on that.
Awesome.
But in House Bill 304, the juvenile justice revisions, there is a change there so that we can flag that, because that was one of the unintended consequences that left our administrators without a lot to enforce school attendance. Thank you. That's a great question. Board members.
So there's been so much conversation around our libraries, you know, whether it's been up at the legislature or in the media. Could you, I mean, I'm looking at 465, HB 465, which passed. What do we see as, how do we now make those changes? You know, do you see a financial change that we're going to have to be making, you know, with the platform? I mean, what's going to be the consequences? Do you know the fallout?
Well, I don't know. I was hoping to chat with you and Dr. Hall, Alan, because I'm wondering if the things that we have now, if providing
it's
parents
already
a login is sufficient. It's not, okay. So I don't think.
So since legislature's ended last Friday, we haven't fleshed out a lot of this.
Why?
But it sounds like from what Tiffany and Christine are saying, there will probably be new software that we'll need to purchase for our libraries.
So it seems like that there's a lot of unknown, right, until the dust settles, which is usually April, before we really have an idea of some of these changes, because I think that there's even curriculum changes that were really interesting, that came out of the legislature also. So,
Yeah, and I will point out that House Bill 465 did not come with a fiscal note either.
right,
So.
which was so interesting that it didn't come with a fiscal note, but it does come with a fiscal note at the district level, obviously. So one of the things I think that might be really interesting for us to do this year is to do some sort of analysis of what those let's say mandated, unfunded cost districts, so that it's just another talking point that can be used, as Yandri goes up to the legislature, or we attend the JLC meetings, to be able to say, but it isn't unfunded, because there is a cost to it. And that's just one example, right? Thanks, Yandri, for all the work that you did. We appreciate it, and for watching over us at the JLC meetings. I really enjoyed having a lot of people there with us, this year, and, being able to talk through some of the impacts of some of these bills. So thanks.
Yandri, I had a follow-up question to HB 465 as well.
Yeah.
I know that our students, once they're enrolled, their student ID card allows them access to check out books at the Salt Lake City Public Library system. And I know there's two very different competing elements, I think, relative to library core values that you see in the American Library Association and the Public Library Association versus what's regulated at a state level with schools and LEA libraries. And I'm wondering if there was any thought or discussion, one, about that competing value and what, again, unintended consequences might mean for our students accessing materials in our public library system.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that. It's something we'll have to talk through and think about. And I also don't know if we're unique in providing that access to our students to that additional library, or if other LEAs might do that as well throughout the state. So, might be different LEAs.
Thank you.
Nate,
Oh, Board Member Jensen.
I just wanted to report, you elected me to be on the USBA, which in turn put me on the Joint Legislative Committee. And having worked on that, I just really want to express appreciation to all of those individuals that are sacrificing they're sacrificing their Fridays to be there, and then they're also sacrificing the time to be monitoring all of those education bills. So, Yandri, what I did was I counted up, because what the JLC does is they will issue support for a bill, or they'll issue opposition to a bill. And these are individuals that have, if you ask me, significant educational background and an understanding of the educational system. The superintendents are all a part of the JLC, as well as a board member from all of the school boards across the state. So I counted 21 bills that we opposed were defeated. So to me, that's significant. And then 29 bills that we supported were passed. So I think sometimes we get discouraged when we hear, well, this voucher thing snuck up on us, and then there's the constitutional earmark, and I mean, those are distressing. But I think we also have to recognize that we were successful in a number of bills in reflecting what we think is educationally best for our students. And then one other thing that I just wanted to share was one of the other directors on this board, his name is John Robison. He's the board member from the Davis School District, one of the largest school districts in the state. He, in one of our USBA board meetings, explained that after that voucher decision was made, their school district went back and looked at the $42 million and how it would have been used if it was used for mental health, which the legislature was acknowledging was a significant issue facing us. Without going through the report, but I'll give it to Nate and so that you could look at it. And what they did was they were using the allocation formulas that are usually used when you have a general funding, okay? If they followed the regular formula, Davis would have received $4.6 million. The Salt Lake City School District would have received $1.2 million. That would have had a significant impact on our being able to address mental health issues. And in those mental health issues, what we're talking about are counselors, paraprofessionals. They've even gone so far in the Davis district to show how that with that money, they would have been able to accommodate all of the needs to address mental health challenges in their district. I think those are the sorts of things that we need to do so that the public can be aware of the impact that decisions have on the students in all of our schools.
Thank you, Board Member Jensen. Appreciate your work and of course the acknowledgement of Yandri and all the other folks at USBA that follow this work for us as well. Thank you, Yandri, for joining us.
Thank you.
The next topic on our report agenda is board finance. I'm going to turn this over to Business Administrator Alan Kersley to kick this off.
So as the next process in our budget setting for next school year, today we're going to talk about tax rates. Again, this is just a discussion to familiarize the board. We're not anticipating any action today, but as it's to give you information so when the budget is presented to you the first part of June for a vote, you have the information you need to make those decisions. I'm trying, Sam. I'm trying. All right. If I have to get Tiffany over here. Thank you, Sam. You might just have to roll it for me. So our first slide here shows assessed valuations. So this is going to be a test for Christy. As assessed valuation goes up, what happens to the tax rate?
It's down. It goes down.
It goes down. So here you can see historical. The blue line is the estimated market value. Then we have the total taxable value and net taxable value, just different ways that the assessors assess our properties and then they get taxed. For next year, we anticipate or are estimating an additional 4.7% increase in the assessed valuation. That's a conservative estimate, but the increases, as we've seen, are slowing down from what they've been historically. But as we build our proposed tax rate, this is the assessed valuation we're using. Next slide, Sam. So certified tax rate. So the certified tax rate is in essence a rate which will generate the same amount of revenue as it did in the previous year. So again, as the value goes up, the rate goes down to give us the same amount of revenue. So just a couple of things we want to talk about on this slide. So if there's inflation, does the certified tax rate help us? No, because we're getting the same amount of money. So as expenses go up, the certified tax rate keeps giving us the same amount of revenue. So that's always something to keep in mind as we're looking at what our tax rates are going to be, is that the certified tax rate does not adjust for inflation. We also, the only certified tax rate that will give us additional money is if there's growth. So if there's a new development, a new housing development or something, that'll generate additional revenue to cover the cost of those new developments. Here in Salt Lake, we don't get a ton of growth. The city's pretty well built out, but there is some each year that we get. So we have some rates, and we'll get into the detail about what those rates are, but the basic rate is set by the state government. So we don't get any say in what that rate is, and we'll discuss the basic rate here in a little bit. And then our general obligation bond lit rate is set to cover whatever our debt expenditures are for that year. And again, we'll go into a little bit more detail as we get into the presentation. Sam, next slide. So this slide shows total tax rates for the school districts within the county. It's pretty small reading, but there at the top you have Murray, Jordan, Canyons, Granite, and Salt Lake at the bottom. There you can see the different rates. The basic school levy rate for all school districts is the same because, again, that's set by the legislature. And then the different levies are different depending on which board's needs and how the boards have set those rates. So you can see amongst the districts in the county, Salt Lake has the lowest tax rate.
Alan?
Yes.
Would you mind just going along the bottom and just talking a little bit about what the voted local levy is?
We're going to talk about each levy individually in the
perfect.
next slide.
Thank you.
All right, next slide, Sam. So first we're going to talk about the basic rate. Again, the basic rate is set by the legislature, and the basic rate is what's used to fund the weighted pupil unit. So there's two sources that come in with the weighted pupil unit: property tax generated by the basic rate and income tax. So over the last 4 or 5 years, the legislature is, so remember we talked about that the rates go down as assessment goes up. Well, the legislature's held the basic rate. They gave it a floor for a couple of years, and then that generated additional funding, which was allocated to school districts to fund stuff like the Teacher and Student Success Act, some equalization and capital needs throughout the state. That floor sunsetted this year, and it was not renewed by the legislature. So you're going to see the basic rate it's going to go back down to where it would have been based on the assessed valuation and then the amount of revenue that is needed to be generated by the value of the WPU.
Can you give us just a real life example? There are so many accounting names in this.
Yeah, so the estimated rate for 2023, so when we talk rates and years, so property tax is based on a calendar year. So when I say 2023, that's this calendar year, but that'll be money that we will generally use for our 2023-2024 school year. So the basic rate's been held at approximately 0.0016. That'll then float down to a 0.0014. And on the next slide, Sam, I'm going to kind of show you the effect of this. So what this shows is WPU funding for the Salt Lake City School District. The blue line is the amount of revenue that we receive from the state based on the weighted pupil unit. The orange line is the amount we receive from the basic rate, and then the gray line is the combined. So as you can see, as we get more money from the basic rate, the amount of state revenue we get decreases. So what you're going to see next year is those lines are going to converge a little bit because the basic rate's dropping, so we'll get less revenue from the basic rate, which will be offset by an increase revenue in state revenue. Does that help?
Yes.
Charts and graphs, are they less accounting-y?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
The gray line will look very much the same, just where it gets funded from will be different.
Right.
Okay.
And the gray line has some offsets by, we have an increase in the weighted pupil unit, which we talked about is 6%, but then we have a decrease in the number of students. So those are two competing things that offset each other. Any questions on the basic rate? All right, Sam, do you want to move to the next slide? Voted local levy. So it's called voted local levy because the voters have to approve that the board can levy this rate. The voters of Salt Lake City approved a voted local levy on April 30th, 1974. The revenues generated from this levy are for general education needs, salaries, benefits, supplies, etc. For 2023 tax year, we are estimating that rate to be at 0.00519. Again, that would be a certified rate. We're anticipating not increasing that rate, so it'll float down to a 0.000519. I just want to note that these rates are not finalized until June, when the Tax Commission finalizes all of their assessed values, and they actually calculate it for us, and then we tell them if we're increasing that rate or not from the certified rate. The maximum rate allowed on here is 0.0018. So you can see, well, we're below the maximum on that one. Next slide. Okay, board local levy. So the difference between the board local levy and the voted local levy is that the voters had to approve the voted one. The voters did not have to approve the board one. That was just approved by the Board of Education. Again, revenues generated with this levy are for general education needs. We're estimating the 2023 rate at a 0.001356. And of that rate, a 0.000121 is dedicated specifically for early reading initiatives, K through 3 reading initiatives. And what's interesting is, as the rates float down, as we've discussed, the amount that is required to put into that early reading stays the same. So each year, that pot of money for those needs grows, because they're just taking it's the same size pie, but that early reading initiative rate takes a little bit bigger chunk of that pie each year. So we continue to see additional revenues that we can put towards those early literacy programs. The maximum rate allowed is a 0.00250. So again, below that, we're below the maximum. Next slide, Sam.
Alan,
Yes.
on the board local levy, you said that the board is the one, and that's done through our truth and taxation, right?
Yeah, so at some point long before all of our time, the board approved to have that levy. And so it stays there, and if we're going to increase it, then that'll go through truth and taxation.
Alan, would you go back one, Sam? Christy, I think that's an insightful question, because the board probably set it at somewhere close to the 0025, but then over the years, as values have gone up, that rate's been driven down. And so the dollar amount we're bringing in today is the same dollar amount that we were bringing in 10, 15, 20 years ago, whenever that was. I'll bet you the dollar buys less today than it did 20 years ago. But because none of this adjusts for inflation. It gets forced down, so the dollar amount stays the same.
So if you remember last year, we did an increase of 1.5 million to increase salaries. This is the levy we increased last year. Yep. All right, Sam, next. So the capital local levy. So funds generated from the capital levy must be used for capital expenditures such as new buildings, building renovations, roofs, HVACs, etc. So those funds can't then be used for, say, teacher salaries, because if the capital levy generates them, then the revenues have to be used for that purpose. Again, this rate is set by the board. We're proposing next year to have a rate of 0.00612. And if you remember last board meeting, we talked about increasing that levy to capture the debt that's rolling off. So we have debt that's rolling off, and the debt levy will decrease, and recapturing those revenues and putting them into the capital levy to continue to pay for the increased costs that are occurring in our capital needs with buildings and roofs and construction projects. So the 0.00612 will be a tax increase of 0.000042 above our estimated certified rate, and that will generate another $2.3 million, which in essence is just going to be shifting from revenue we have to pay debt to revenue we have to pay for our capital needs. Again, the maximum rate allowed is a 0.00300, so still well below the maximum on that one. Next slide, Sam. So GO, or General Obligation Bond Payment Levy. Again, that levy is whatever will generate enough revenue to meet our bond obligations for that year. So as noted, so we're proposing a 0.000057, which is going to generate $2.3 million less than the previous year because our obligations for debt have decreased by $2.3 million as we paid off one of our bonds this year. Next slide, charter school levy. So the charter school levy, which shows up on as we do taxes, it shows up there. The school district does not receive any of these funds generated by the charter school levy. They all go straight to the State Board of Education, which then distributes these revenues to charter schools. The estimated rate on that one is it's calculated by a combination of the Tax Commission and the State Board of Education, and that rate we're estimating at 0.00071. Then when you look at maybe a charter school's financial statement, you're going to see a revenue line called local replacement. That is the money generated by this charter school levy. Again, we don't see any of that money, but we are the charter schools can't levy taxes. So this is how this legislature set up to fund charter schools. All right, is there any way you can make that a little bit bigger, Sam? Just a little bit, Sam. All right, that's good. So here I've put together kind of a history of the tax rates, showing the actual rates of 2019, 2021, and 22. And then there in row 23, if we weren't going to propose a tax increase, what the preliminary certified rate is. And then we're proposing that increase to the capital levy. So you can see in the next row that our preliminary proposed rate, the only difference between the certified rate and the proposed rate is that 0.00042 in the capital local levy to recapture that $2.6 million. But as you can see, back in 29, our total tax rate was a 0.005393, and our proposed rate for 2023 is a 0.004015. So that rate continues to decline as the assessed value goes up. And next page, Sam, for one more summary slide. So this just shows all of the levies. Our proposed rate in the first column, and the second rate is the maximum. So knowing that if we do have needs, there's capacity there to generate additional revenue if it was needed. Next slide, Sam. So what this slide shows is the effect of the proposed property tax increase that will be on a home. Again, we use a $100,000 home. We know nobody actually owns a home worth $100,000, but it makes the math easier, right? So on a $100,000 home of assessed value, that $2.6 million will cost $3.25 a year for that homeowner than if we were to just adopt the certified tax rate. So that's going to be the increase, $3.25 per $100,000 worth of assessed value, which is still down $18.26 from the 2022 tax rate. So as assessed value goes up, go down, we're trying to recapture a little bit of that in that $3.25 increase. And then the next slide just shows the effect on a business, because homes are taxed at a 55% of their assessed value. Businesses are taxed at 100% of their value. So the proposed tax increase would be $59 a year to $1 million business over the certified tax rate. And last slide, Sam. So that's kind of discussion of tax rates as we're preparing the budget. Our next steps in the budget, for the board members who are new, generally we have, if desired by board members, small group meetings where we'll meet with, 2 or 3 and go through in more detail the budget as we prepare to have the board approve it. On May 2nd, we will bring to the board meeting the executive summary. On our May 16th meeting, we'll have the full budget there for your review, so we can address any questions you may have. And then on June 6th will be our budget hearing where the public can come and talk about our budget. And at that point, we would anticipate the board to approve the budget and the preliminary tax rates. Now, if we move forward with this tax increase, then that will require a truth and taxation hearing, which will happen the first board meeting in August. And again, the public will have another chance to come talk about that as well at that time. And that's when we'll truly approve the tax rate. So when we approve the budget, we're just kind of approving, yeah, this is our plan. The actual rate will be approved if we do the increase in the truth and taxation meeting. Any questions on tax rates?
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Up next on the report
I love my
agenda
accounting speech.
is the topic of boys volleyball.
Missy, I saw Missy. There's Missy.
All right, what Alan is passing around is just some basic startup costs that I came up with after doing some research on what it would cost us to be able to start boys volleyball.
Missy, would you take one step back and say, boys volleyball, where's that coming from?
I'm just getting there. Hold on, coming. It started back a couple of years ago, well, actually a long time ago, probably about 10 years ago. Boys volleyball came around when I was an athletic director up at Highland High School and on a deck with UHSAA. And it has continually come forward wanting to be sanctioned. And a couple of years ago, it was finally sanctioned. I'm on the emerging sports committees out at UHSAA, and there was enough support for it for us to be able to have them sanction boys volleyball. It comes into play in the year 23-24, so we won't have boys volleyball actually starting until spring of 24. The problem that we have with this is that puts 9 sports into the spring, but that's what the Board of Trustees voted, was for it to go into spring sports. So we'll have lacrosse, and both lacrosses are in the spring, and now boys volleyball also along with that. So, but I think having spoken to all the principals, the 3 principals of our high schools, they really want, they've got a good following for it. The boys are excited about it. They want to be able to play. And I don't know if you've noticed at some of our schools, like outside when the weather's good, you'll see the boys are out there, hitting the volleyball around all the time. Girls volleyball is strong in our district, especially at West High and East High. They've got a good, strong program. And the boys would like to start too. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so what I did is I just came up with some rough costs and estimates of what we would need. The interesting thing about this was trying to find uniforms for boys, because across the state, United States, boys volleyball is not really big. It's just starting to come around. Boys sand volleyball is, but not so much as indoor volleyball. So I got hold of one of our representatives, and he was able to give me some costs on this. So roughly, it's not going to cost us anything what it cost us to start lacrosse for the district to come forward and put out the startup cost for boys volleyball, because it doesn't take that much. We already have all of the poles and in all of the gyms up at each of the high schools from the girls. They play fall, so there wouldn't be that conflict. So the best way, I looked at what is the recommended team size. Most coaches say anywhere between 12 to 15 players. We're looking at starting varsity and only JV. Now, I can feel Christy's going to ask me about the Title IX implication, correct? Uh-huh. And that came with, our Title IX is covered because of competitive cheer now that is in. So unfortunately, what that did though is it makes it where we can't add another boys soccer freshman, sophomore team if we do boys volleyball. So, but it is needed, it's wanted, and I think it's something that would be really good for our district. As you can see, like I said, these are rough estimates on the cost. That UHSAA has just sent out a survey out to all of the principals to ask them what the likelihood of how many kids they want. It's just that would want boys volleyball and how many players they would have. I know all three of our schools have got strong following for it. In fact, I received a call from another district, not our neighboring district, but another one neighboring to that district, and of a mother that was looking to see if we were going to sanction it because she had heard their district wasn't going to sanction it. So I told her to follow tonight, and then in 2 weeks we'll decide. So, but I think we have a strong following for it, and our boys need it, they want it, and I think it is a great thing to be able to put into our sanctioned sports.
Thank you so
Any
much.
questions?
I have, yeah, I do have some actually. One, so it's going to be played indoor, is that correct?
Correct.
So will that lead into like an extra cost to like make the space like where the nets are going to stand? Or
We've already got those all in for girls volleyball.
Yes, okay, that's good.
So,
and in regards to student fees, what is the cost?
you know what, I
Expected to be
don't
too.
have what the new fee schedule is with me.
It's on the fee schedule. All we did was copy what the girls' volleyball is
Okay.
and move that over to the boys.
Okay.
And that's what we would be doing.
Don't know at the top of our head what it is, but that's how we came up with it.
That's where we came up with.
Sounds
The
good.
extra cost that we didn't have, and that would be for the coach and their assistant coaches. That is why I have that down on the bottom. We're looking at 18 matches. That's what the girls play right now. And again, we would follow with what our schedule shows. Now, this is just a bare minimum of what it would cost because that would be a coach that is not somebody that is a certified teacher that is in our district that has a contract. This is what we would be, that we pay our coaches that are not our paraprofessionals or that are not on our a contracted person. Did that answer it for you?
Thank you.
All right. Alan, any questions?
Yeah, just so on that coach's pay, if you remember back when we did the school allocations discussion on the budget, one of those columns is for extracurricular activities. So what Missy's saying here is we'd have to bump that up to cover these additional coaches that we would hire.
Correct.
We just do that through the budget revision process later next year.
Thank you, Alan. Any additional questions? Superintendent, do you have any sense about a timeline of when we'll see this again?
Well, that's my question. This is coming to the board as a report. You're just letting us know that boys volleyball is an option. We put it on the fee schedule just in case,
Correct.
so that we wouldn't have to come back and do that again. Would we, does this require an affirmative action by the board to approve it, say we're going to go forward with
Yes.
this? Then in that case, we'd need to come back
In 2 weeks.
in a couple of weeks and move on that.
I think some of the discussion is if you want it to go on consent agenda, we could just put it on next board meeting's consent agenda since it's a study session, or we can push it back to April's business meeting.
All right. I'm not seeing a lot of head nods from the board at this moment. Maybe Bryce and I can do some individual discussions with folks between now and then, or Christy, do you have a
Maybe
thought?
just some further explanation. You know, what I'm hearing you say is that we need to approve this for the allocation. Is that correct, Alan?
Well, I think the main goal is approve it as a sanctioned sport in Salt Lake City
Salt
School
Lake- in
District.
In
our
Salt Lake
district.
City School
Mhm.
District,
As we
right?
did with lacrosse.
Okay.
The budgetary items will be when we revise. So we're still building because we're building the budget right now, we don't want to stop and wait till this decision be made. So we'll build the budget going forward, and then we'll revise next year's budget, and that will be in the documents that we bring you next year.
Right. So I think that, you know, if we want to have further discussion about it, President Salazar, then we would have to do that in April, unless we wanted to make a special, you know, part for it, you know, in our next meeting. But since it has to have a motion and be moved, to me, I think it would be hard to put it on the consent agenda that way. You know, I think it would be better to have a discussion about it. So unless there is some urgency, you know, and we'd be able to do that, then, you know, wait and do it in our next business meeting.
That works for me.
That works for me. If you guys have any questions, please. Oh, that was really tacky. I thought I was talking to coaches. If you have any.
We can be coaches.
It's fine.
You know, I think Ashley's a coach and I'm a coach, so works.
If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or email me, okay?
And Jenny's a coach too.
Yes, Jenny is. She's one of mine. She understood me right away. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Christy, for weighing in on that.
Yep.
Up next, we have our discussion agenda. Item number 1 there is the draft 2023-2024 land trust plans. We have Dr. Lisan Taylor joining us at the table. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. The time is yours.
I'm gonna see if I can work the clicker.
Might be the first tonight. No, I'm just kidding.
My wife would say, how many degrees does it take to work the clicker?
More than I've got.
Good evening, everyone. What we're looking at now is the approval process for our land trust plans. We wanted to review that process because it would be slightly different based on our response to legislative audit that took place. We want to make sure that we get our timeline in place properly to get the plans before you before funds are released. We love our acronyms in education. Okay, I'm good. When you see everybody looking in one direction and it's not you, you're like, okay, what's going on? The acronym LAND stands for Learning and Nurturing Development. So it's the School Learning and Nurturing Development Trust Program as administered by the School Children's Trust Section at the Utah State Board of Education. These funds are generated from the Permanent State School Fund, where revenue from school trust lands are invested. And the program brings tens of millions of dollars annually to meet critical academic needs and enhance and improve academic excellence in our schools. Basically, for this school year, we got $2.7 million, and that's allocated based on enrollment. Oh, sorry, we good? What's the role of the administrator, the SIC, and the faculty? Because we're doing a slight adjustment and building a comprehensive plan, they will review the school's data, complete the critical needs assessment, which we call the CNA. They will determine the areas of focus. They'll work collaboratively to build the school improvement plan. That's the comprehensive plan for which the Land Trust and the TSSA is part of. They will create measurable goals with action steps. Those 4 focus goals that we have will be literacy, in the areas of literacy, numeracy, the achievement gap, and culture. Then they'll work collaboratively with the SCC to create the land trust goals and plan. The School Community Council, SCC, develops and approves the land trust plan. Each school in Utah elects a SCC, and that's consisting of parents, teachers, and the principal. The charter schools have land trust councils. All councils must have a 2-parent majority in terms for the membership. Each council reviews the school-wide assessment data, identifies the focus of the plan, develops plans to improve student academic performance, and the plans are approved by the council, submitted on the Land Trust website, and approved by the local school board. Any questions so far? We're good? Okay. Now, what does the board do? The board reviews and approves the plans. There's 4 basic steps that we look at. Step 1 is to review the land trust plans and give us feedback. You will receive the plans on April 4th for this current school year. Feedback will be due by April 17th. We'll talk about the process for that. Then on May the 2nd, the board will vote to either approve or not approve those plans. Then all the plans must be completed and on the state website and approved by May 15th. This is an example of what you will receive via email. You will get an email from the administrative assistant from my department, Maria. It will show that she shared a file with you. Within that file will be 2 basic elements. One is the assignments. That's the schools you've been assigned to review. And then the land trust plans themselves. Now, how will they look? Once you click and get that shared drive, this is what will pull up. You'll see this exactly like this. It'll be the folders for all the schools. That's so if you want to look at additional schools, you'll have access to review additional schools if you want to. But you will only be assigned 2 schools to review as board members. Now, if you would like to do more, you're more than welcome, and we would love to work with you in doing that. Once you click on the file for the school that's been assigned to you, you'll see these examples pull up. It'll be the land trust plan itself, plus the 2 school review documents. That review document, this is an example of that. You can type directly into this document and it will save for you. If you prefer to have a paper-based document, you can either print or email me and we'll get you a paper-based copy if you would like to do it that way. So you can do it either digitally or paper-based. This is just an example of allowable expenditures. It's listed there: workbooks, professional development, hardware for computers, software, library and media supplies, things like that. And key review questions, and these are contained on that form. Just some example: are the goals in this plan student focused and academic? Are the goals in this plan measurable? This is not an exhaustive list, but this is just something that will serve as a guide for you. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I have a clarifying question. You said that each board member would only be assigned 2 schools to review. Isn't it 2? It's not 2 board members per school?
2 board members per school. You're
okay,
right.
I was going to say we weren't going to get through all of those. Okay.
Good catch.
I inverted it. I apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be a break from previous years.
Yes.
And I didn't include a document of the copy of the document that's the assignments, but it's color coded. Each board member will receive it, and it'll list out all your assignments.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Member Anderson?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the suggestion from the state board is that they look at areas like ELA, math, science, and other board priorities, but it's not a requirement. It's just that school community councils evaluate what is their greatest academic need. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the other question I have is, so the USBA gives us some guidance that if there's like a lot of global requests, that we as a board evaluate whether or not those requests should be in the budget. So I've sat on a number of SCCs, and I have found that almost all of the plans every year are for the same purpose, which is academic intervention or staffing. Is there a time in relationship to looking at these plans that we will talk about things that are globally seen in the plans and how we could absorb those potentially into our overall budget? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that something that's part of this process? Maybe that's a question for Alan.
Yeah, that we've ever done that particular exercise, I don't recall. But I would say when we come back and after you've reviewed them and we're discussing them for approval, that would be a good chance to bring that discussion up.
Okay. Good. Any any other, oh, Board Member Jensen.
I just have a comment on the SCC part of it. I mean, you have identified that the SCC is a critical piece in this. My experience has been that a lot of the parents don't understand the SCC. I don't know if this is the appropriate place or not, but I think that we need to figure out how to inform parents about this. I mean, Ashley, you've been on it, and I mean, I've participated, and a lot of times you see the same parents doing it over and over and over because they're familiar with it and the other parents aren't. Is there a way that we can build into some sort of our school routine, like at back to school night or sometime when we tell the population what the SCC is and what they do and how critical it is for the funding for their school? Christy?
So I feel like I have kind of stepped on this soapbox before, so I'll just step right back up on it again tonight. I think that we have lost the historical perspective that Brian's talking about through a non-existent training that we don't do anymore. And we used to, you know, along with SLEA, we would go out and we would do shared governance training, which included the SCC component and the important piece of the land trust and the school improvement plans. And I would just, again, ask us to put that on our agenda for the summer, you know, that we really do work in partnership with SLEA and re-look at not doing it virtually. It needs to come back to person, because we've lost that, as Brian has said. That training is not there. So you do see sometimes the same parents, or you see SCCs, you know, that only have 1 or 2 people on them, which really isn't compliant. So I would just say again, let's really look at that training. Let's see if we can work with our partners, you know, with our Teachers Association, and really look at how we can bring that training back, which again then speaks to superintendent that when the new superintendent comes on, we used to have monthly meetings with our school community council chairs here at the district, and it was very helpful. It moved to a quarterly, which I heard, you know, mixed reviews about it, but I think that monthly one is just another place, you know, to help inform. The other piece that was included in was our PTAs, that the training was done not only at the SCC meetings, but at back to school nights and at PTA meetings, that the identified group would go around and they would be available to do that. But I also think that as a board, we can require some of that too, which we did at one time. So I am now stepping off of my soapbox.
I just think that it's really critical because I have been at SCCs where they haven't been able to vote because they don't have that 2-parent majority. So we're asking this entity to do something that they can't do because they don't have enough participants. We need to figure out how to educate them.
I appreciate that, Board Member Jensen and Board Member Sweat, and I know that's even something not necessarily related to this topic of land trust, but informing the community and parents about the fee schedule hearings that we have, and how do we make a more concerted effort as a board and as a district to make sure that we have folks here. You know, I floated the idea of maybe offering childcare, you know, for parents. The time commitment for some parents and families is very different than compared to others, and you know, creating that space that accommodates that. I've seen SCCs that meet during the lunch hour. I've seen SCCs that meet at a later time, you know, or early in the morning to make sure that they capture parents who are dropping their kiddos off at school. So I think there's some creative things that we can be thinking about as a district, and I'm looking at Alan as well for some funding elements potentially of how do we cover some of these costs and provide those opportunities to make sure that representation is there.
Sounds like a great use of school discretionary money.
All right.
Yes. I have one.
Board Member Big.
For the SEC, thank you, Brian, for bringing this up. because it is true. And the other issue here is a lot of family, as you said, do not know what is an SEC. They hear the abbreviation multiple times. And even if it is broken down, they still do not know what their role is in that. So personally, as I'm thinking about it, this is a suggestion. If we could have the SEC leadership from each school get together and draft a letter that would have information about like a brief definition of what SEC is and what it does and so and so. And then it'll be given to the schools and the principals will print those and give them to the teachers. And when the parents come for an SEP, then the teacher can hand that actually to the parent as in the form of a letter. Because a lot of parents are very committed to go into the meetings with the teacher to make sure that their kids are doing well. And I think at that moment would be the best time. Personally, it's like a traditional way, a direct communication between the parent and the teacher. And I think we do have enough printers to do that.
Board Member Anderson.
All three of us.
Hello.
Start dashing and work our way down.
I would say that a lot of schools do exactly that, and I think there's a couple of additional things that would be helpful. And one is articulating that under the law, grandparents are allowed to serve now, which expands the pool of available people. And it doesn't accommodate obviously all family types, but it's a little bit offers some more diverse options. I think the issue is a little bit more complex than explaining that it's an opportunity. It's about articulating that when the law changed and linked it to TSSA in certain ways, a lot of the plans seem like a foregone conclusion. And that's why I think part of the issue is if it's funding a teacher or not funding a teacher, there's really only so much an SCC can discuss. And if the greatest academic needs are always identified as intervention or basic staffing, that's why I think we need to have a bigger conversation than like getting family members to join an SCC, but actually understand, is the land trust plan distinct from just going with the foregone conclusion of what the school needs to have basic staffing? I think that's the bigger issue in terms of SCCs, and I think a lot of schools are doing what other board members have suggested. At back to school night, you advertise, we make videos, announcements, send home flyers. I think many schools are already doing that. And part of the issue for buy-in is articulating the real purpose of the entity and the plan. And I think we have a role in that in terms of what the USBA tells us to do, of looking at, are all schools asking for a similar thing? And how do we address enabling them to choose more unique things to their school site by funding the staffing that they are asking for with land trust?
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. Board Member Jensen.
Mohammed, you were saying that the school generate what they do. I also think that it's important because, as Ashley was saying, some of this is mandated. And what you need to do is there's a template. Some of these SCCs, they don't know how to do the agenda. Well, there's a template that you can get through utah.gov. There's, guidelines that explain who leads the SCC. You have the parent chair. There are so many of these things that we have just assumed that they understand. And as Christy said, they haven't had any current training.
That's right. So I've been looking, and I always want to turn to my encyclopedia of state code, which is Christina. But a number of years ago, they changed the requirements in the code that said a school board's responsibility is to make sure that we have school community council trainings, and that it's a part of the code, it's part of the mandate. So I think that just going on everything we've talked about tonight, let's just look at that piece of code. Let's just make sure that we're doing everything that we can to provide the training that we need to at our level to make sure that it's going down into the school level where it's the most important, so that those plans are done with fidelity.
Thank you, board members, for all of your suggestions, and it sounds like we have some work to do to make sure that we're in compliance with our state code and all the other elements that encompass what we have in front of us with your presentation, Dr. Taylor, and we have some reports to review, and we'll be seeing those reports probably in the next few weeks, I'm guessing.
April 4.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item number 2 on our discussion agenda is the 2023-2024 board meeting schedule. You'll see the attachment to the agenda that outlines the remaining board meetings that we need to approve for 2023, and then start thinking about 2024 as well. Superintendent, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this?
My understanding is that the board in every March adopts the tentative schedule for board meetings for the coming school year, and these are the dates that correspond to that.
And I'm just, okay, so since we're gonna be working on this, city council, they also have a meeting at the same time, at the same day and time actually as we are. And I'm wondering if there is anything that we could do to kind of like, probably have a different date, or, because I would love to go to city council meetings, because people do ask, questions, and a lot of times they think, I'm sure you've all encountered that, they think we are in the council while I'm in the board, but I would love to know as well, so.
Yeah, I don't know the historical significance of why we host our meetings on Tuesdays. I think it's just something that I inherited when I joined the board, but I know that topic of the conflict between city council meetings has certainly come up. I think at some point too, hopefully soon, there could be the benefit of having joint council and school board meetings, either on a annually or a quarterly basis. We haven't quite decided what that looks like. Certainly we'll be bringing that to you, but your point's well heard. I'm wondering how other board members feel about that too.
I mean, not having historical knowledge about why it's on a Tuesday, I think on some level we could go back and forth about the calendar.
Sure.
But it probably makes sense to proceed on a certain day of the week knowing we'll conflict with something. So maybe we hear what is said and prioritize having some shared meetings or finding ways to collaborate on some of the dates, because I don't know if we conflict every time or only some of the time. I haven't looked at that. I'm looking at Jennifer to see if she gives me some type of...
It's always,
so
same time.
Yeah, they meet every Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we only meet on 2 of the 4 meetings that
Right.
they have,
So you
and
could go
sometimes
to
5.
two,
So
Yeah. So I think on some level, it doesn't get better than that, right? In a full
Right.
calendar of multiple city and governmental entity meetings. And so to me, it makes sense to move this forward, but prioritize ways to collaborate with the city council so that conflict is not as much of an issue.
Please.
We met with the mayor. Jennifer, we're looking forward to an invitation that when the mayor and I met to start up the quarterly meetings again, she said, "Let me take that on and we'll invite you." And that's just been a couple of weeks, and it sounds like that's about to come.
The council themselves are the ones that are kind of coordinating it,
Right.
and I'm working with them.
Right.
So those meetings will start up again pretty quickly.
And I know that's a topic that the council and the mayor and us have all expressed a desire to have some joint meetings with the city in some capacity. But some more to come on that. Board Member Sweat.
So as we're looking at the calendar, I can see that in 2024 we have the NSBA conference, but we don't have the USBA conference listed. And I believe that those dates are the 4th through the 6th, if we just want to add those, so that we have those on our
That's a good catch.
on our agenda, not on our agenda, on our radar. Yeah, calendar, radar, whatever you want to choose.
Thank you for catching that, Board Member Sweat. Are there any other things that folks are thinking about? Board Member Anderson?
I was just going to say, are you looking for a motion then?
I could be, yes.
That-
But you know, it does kind of follow a process where we might want to think about it, but there's not a rush in some ways, and we also have some dates to discuss with the superintendent search as well. So it might behoove us to move this forward. The one thing that Superintendent and April and I thought about too was that there's no conflict with Election Day on any of these schedules for November in 2024, which has always been a concern. And I think at a time, we did have a couple of board meetings in my time where they landed on election night, which is a challenge.
So maybe what we do is table this. Is that what you'd like to do? And then, because in the past, we've always had to come back, you know, to the calendar and redo every time we put a meeting in. And so maybe wait until we have a firmer idea of how many dates we might need to add into the calendar before we put the calendar forward. Do you want to do that?
Yep.
Or as is right now and then just go back and do it?
I think the superintendent search dates will all be I'm hopeful that those will all be before the 23-24 school year begins.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, duh, that's right, they will be.
Yeah.
So that doesn't, yeah. So that actually doesn't have an impact.
Yeah.
Yep. Unless you want to set a time for a board retreat.
That is a good question, and I know we've
Because-
talked about pushing that to.
Wait until after the new
Yeah.
superintendent comes in, so. Okay. Oh, did we really have a board meeting scheduled for, in July? Because we've been taking July off.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
So when we skip an entire month
We
of
had
board
this
meetings,
discussion.
we have purchase orders that can't be acted upon, and so it just delays a lot of stuff. So even if that July board meeting ends up being a consent agenda type board meeting only, Tyler's really pushing of having some action in July, so we're not having to have purchase orders put on hold until August when the board can approve them.
So it could even possibly be a
10-minute
remote,
electronic meeting.
an electronic meeting, that we could do it on Zoom.
If that's the case, my wife would be happy because that's her
Yeah,
birthday.
because I was just
so-
going to say, I think that we're gone that day, so, okay.
Okay. So, Christy, is your suggestion of tabling this still stand?
No,
Okay.
because I totally, didn't think about the.
Understood.
Yeah, because we'll have him hired before, him or her hired before then.
Okay.
So no, I think that that's fine if we want to put it forward.
I would move that we put it forward with the addition of the USBA dates that Christy mentioned.
I'll second.
By put it forward, I mean move to action.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. So we'll follow our previous tradition of moving things to action and then taking action on them once that's been approved. So we can take both of those votes now. So I have a motion on the table. Any discussion to the motion? We have a second as well. Seeing none. Board Member Anderson, would you please just restate the motion?
Yeah, I move that we send the board meeting schedule to action with the addition of the USBA dates that Christy mentioned.
Which are January 4th through the 6th.
January 4th through the 6th.
All right. We'll start with a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
You okay over there, Sika?
Jenny Sika, yes.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Now I'm looking for a motion to approve the notice meeting schedule for the 2023-2024 school year.
So moved.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion that we haven't already had? Seeing none. We'll start with a roll call vote, starting with myself. Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, Board, for having that discussion with us. And we'll move on to the next discussion agenda item, which
Nate.
is the 2023 through 2020.
President Salazar, we need to move to our time certain
Thank you
public
for
hearing.
catching that. 1 minute. Thank you so much. We do have a open hearing for our time certain public hearing on the draft student fee schedule. Is there anybody here to speak regarding that topic and that fee schedule? Seeing none. All right, we will close the hearing on that. Dr. Buendia, you're more than welcome to join us back up here.
I got excited.
You should be. This is good work.
Yes.
Thank you for
It's
joining
incredible.
us, Dr. Buendia.
We met our deadline. So, congratulations, everybody involved here and those of you who are watching from home. Good evening. I hope you're all well. As you received the latest copy of the strategic plan, we have incorporated all the feedback we received from you in previous meetings from February to today. We hadn't received any other feedback, so this is before you for hopefully board approval. And I'm here to just answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Buendia. Is there any questions from the board? We've discussed this a number of times throughout this last year and since the beginning of this school year with our new board members. I know Board Member Jensen, you mentioned that you had some thoughts about it as well.
I do have some thoughts. I wasn't a part of a lot of those discussions prior to. I was wondering if it would be possible to put a glossary in this, because as I read through this, there are so many acronyms, so many different committees. I think it would be helpful for whoever it is that's reading the document to be able to turn to a glossary so that they could quickly understand, what the acronym is or what the committee is. I mean, I've written down a couple of them. Let's see.
There's a,
I thought there was a
there is a
glossary.
glossary.
Oh, where is that?
43, page 43.
Gosh, I went all the way through it. Well, I'm
See if that's not,
silly
if
here.
that captures the ones that you're.
Yeah, but look and see if any of them are missing that you.
And we can certainly add some more. And so what we try to do, and I will thank Yandari, okay, she'll hear it from somebody. When, she reminded us that it's important to reduce the number of acronyms and really spell things out. So this used to be a full page of acronyms.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we were able to reduce it because we opted to actually spell out the acronym. Because as we translate it, it makes it easier to translate in other languages if we have it spelled out. But if you see, as you're reviewing it, and you see that we are missing a description of what the acronyms are, or as I heard you say, committees.
Right.
Let me know, and I'm happy to add them.
Okay. I mean, I must have, and I mean, I went through this, but somehow I must have slipped. I mean, I saw the committee members and I thought, well, we need to certainly thank them for all of their work. But when I look at the glossary, that's helpful with the acronyms. But for me, when I'm looking at dual capacity building framework, I don't know what dual capacity building framework is. So I don't know if that goes under a glossary or if that goes under a dictionary, but I think it would be helpful. Let's see. I'm trying to see. Okay, a family school partnership team. that was another one that I thought, what does a family school partnership team consist of? Student support committee. What are all of these different entities and what comprises them? I think that that's helpful for teachers and administrators, because I think sometimes you're, in your SIC and you're going, well, what is that? Or
I'm absolutely happy to make that or add the information, and I think it would fit under the glossary.
Glossary of terms would be,
It's a really good idea.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sort of like board voted leeway.
Then there were a couple of other things, and maybe I have missed, the opportunity. If I was supposed to be submitting these, I didn't understand that. But like on page 13, it talks about the PBIS, the Positive Behavioral Plan. It says it's district-wide. So does that mean that the district is going to be establishing a district-wide PBIS, or is it site-based? Are the schools developing their own PBIS? As I was reading it.
I'd be willing to give you a minute of my time.
No, those are just some of the questions that.
Okay. I'm happy if you have more questions, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding the protocol. Would they be emailed to you, Board
That's
President?
fine, yeah.
And then you'll send them along to me. The good news is that, remember, again, I'm going to just always be a cheerleader for this. It's a living document. And so as we are noticing things and the need, we can go ahead and update it. And so as a real quick response to you, but I'll wait for more questions. So our district has adopted a while ago, the positive behavior intervention system. Is just not being implemented with fidelity across the district. And so to some degree, there will be, what we're striving to do is have consistency and coherence across the district, where it will be personalized is at the site level where they're deciding. So for example, at an Emerson, their universals might sound different than they will at East High.
Okay. Right.
So, however, the protocols and the procedures and this notion of having a commitment to teach positive ways to interact with one another, that will be similar across the district. And so it's just getting to those practices.
Okay.
So hopefully that'll give you an idea. So we still, of course, we want to definitely respect and honor individual identities of schools and cultures, if you will. However, we also want to have consistency in practice and commitment and fidelity across the district, because we do have a lot of moving around from school to school, and students and parents should be able to have some level of predictability.
And Board Member Jensen, I think
Can I use a couple of Bryce's minutes?
you can use
offered?
all of mine if you'd like. So
Okay.
please continue. It's important. We have this opportunity in front of us.
I'm happy to hear that, because I think that we do have lots of PBISs around that, I've just seen that in my experience as an educator, and it can be confusing. Okay, this is how it was at this school, and now it's this. So I like that idea that there's some consistency, but I agree that it does need to be tailored to the, the individual school. But then I had a couple of other questions, and one of them was, okay, on page 15, it talks about social and emotional learning, and I mean, we've talked about that a lot, and one of the goals is that we wanted to have 40 minutes a week of social emotional learning. Is there like an outline of what social and emotional learning is? I have had individuals ask me, well, my student they come home and they tell me they're doing social emotional learning. I want to know what that is. So do we have somewhere where we have identified, okay?
We have a framework that
Okay.
outlines what our tenets are.
Okay.
And so we can definitely send that to you so that you have that available. And in this, so the 40 minutes a week is a commitment to explicitly teach ways to self-regulate and ways to understand how we are feeling, and I say global we, but specifically students, but this applies to adults as well, how we are feeling in a particular moment and having tools to help us navigate those feelings so that we are engaging in positive and productive ways of communication and resolving issues.
Okay, and I appreciate that explanation. One of the concerns that has been, okay, are they teaching values? And that's something that parents have strong feelings about. So that explanation that you just gave, I mean, it wasn't values. You're talking about
strategies
for self-regulation and, having emotional well-being and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't know if that can be fleshed out a little bit or something to allay some of their concerns. Then down on page 18, you talked about a goal to cultivate civic knowledge skills, which I really have to commend you on too, because I think that we don't. I'm thinking back on my experience in the classroom. You run out of time. I'm just telling you the practicality of, okay, you've got so many minutes that you've got to teach language arts and so many minutes that you're teaching math. And then when we introduce social and emotional, the thing that ends up happening is the teacher ran out of time in the day. So what do they drop? They drop social studies. And in social studies, that's where civics is. And to me, civics is important, just like you said, because that's where we talk about how we work as a democratic society. And to me, that's part of the challenge of working together in a classroom. So I think it would be nice to say, was there a specific amount of time that you were going to have
I'm looking
civics?
over to Dr. Hall because this is within her realm, and she's the pillar lead for that pillar.
For elementary civics, we would love to have 20 minutes a day. We'd like to see that 20 to 30 minutes a day integrated, if necessary, into the language arts.
Okay, those sorts of things would be really helpful if they were put somewhere so that the teacher could see that, so that what I'm trying to help us understand here is you're in the classroom and you're being told, okay, you've got to have this many minutes here, and you've got to have this many minutes here, and you've got to have this many minutes here, and then you start adding them up and you're going, I don't have that many minutes today. So I hope that we're really doing the math and finding out that we really have the minutes to do all of what we're asking the,
We appreciate that, and
the
actually,
teacher.
our team mapped the day.
Okay.
And so we have a map of the minutes of the day. And it is, I mean, you're right on the money. The addition of some of the other things that have gone in, it becomes tight. You have to begin to make some choices.
Yeah, okay. And one of the things that I thought about there was, okay, so then maybe you, like, okay, if it's 20 minutes a day and you're doing it in language arts or something like that, you're incorporating it in there, okay. I just want to make sure that we make it so they can do the language arts with fidelity and not like, okay, now how do I figure out how to get civics into my language arts? And
We actually mapped them so that they go with the readings.
okay.
And so they're kind of side by side, but you're right, operational skills have a lot of
And if I may, what I'll share with the board and our audience who's listening is this is our overarching document. And what we'll do every year, as you'll see from year one implementation that's in there, it'll be broken down. And as we introduce it to teachers and administrators and other personnel, it'll be even more specific. And so this is kind of like the umbrella, and it's giving you a lot of information and what we hope to do. And I have to like, oh, there it is. On page 40, for example, it says implementation of strategic plan year one. It gives the public as well as the board great detail in terms, or more detail than some of these other pages in terms of what we're doing for the year. And so we'll have that available every year. And then of course, we'll be learning about what's going well, what targets we've hit, where we need to improve. And so we'll again modify it according to your feedback and other feedback. And so year two will, and that's the reason why we only provided you with year one. And so we can, it'll be, we're definitely, we heard a lot of great feedback from all of you. And I remember, I think in cabinet, honestly, we were talking about how we need to keep in mind the understanding that we need to have it really clearly articulated and supported all the way down to where the rubber hits the road, right? Our classroom teachers, they need to understand clearly what the implications are for their day-to-day work, as well as everyone else. So it's definitely something that we have as a top priority.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. I'm thinking as well, I mean, teachers get overwhelmed and they are thinking, I don't know how to do all of this. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to retain teachers, and I just don't want them to be, I can't do this.
I like the way Sandra just talked about this being an umbrella. We've toyed with the idea. I'd say toyed with it. We've played with the idea of having this be, in some districts, this is an electronic document. It's almost not even printed. And then the idea would be when you get to, so I'm looking there on page 40, and there's the, the 40-minute per week thing, or there's the create and offer differentiated MTSS, and there was a PBI. Anyway, that those would then have links to the document that underlies this. To have that be one printable document would be 14 or 15,000 pages, right? But to have the maps that we were just talking about, because I know I've talked to teachers, oh, now you want me to take 20 minutes of my language arts time out and make that civics, or you want me to do that on top? And no, we see those going together. And then it's, well, but if you put them together, then you're taking away my creativity and you're limiting from what I'm trying to. No, these are just the objectives that we're trying to, that are being promoted. PBIS is another example. Yes, the board has established a district-wide expectation of PBIS principles and standards that are being implemented everywhere, but fine-tuned and designed specifically for the needs of your specific population. To capture that in one printable document, we had a lengthy conversation about that, but to building this out so that there are links to the very things you're looking for, that when we get to that page and we have that question, that we can touch on the link, and then that cascades forward and we can see some specifics and say, oh, that makes sense.
I think that is really on point. So that when you are saying, okay, PBIS, so then you click on the link and you see, okay, this is what the district is looking at as their overall, so that you're not, because you're in these conversations and someone's saying, well, it's this, and someone's saying it's this, and you're going, I don't have time to talk about this for 45 minutes. I got to go figure out how to do all of this.
Yeah.
So thank
that's,
you.
I
think
think
that's
the
a very
vision.
good solution.
It's going to take more than till the next board meeting to implement that. But we're moving in that direction. This year really is an implementation, almost planning year, planning/implementation year, as we fine tune the direction, the very things that you're talking about. You're asking questions that I'm trying not to laugh out loud, because it's like there's an echo in the room. We had this conversation. Do we put that in, or does that stay separate? But you're right on in the same conversations we've been having here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Board Member Jensen. Board Member Sweat, and then Board Member Anderson.
So first, Dr. Buendia, thank you so much. I think this is huge and momentous, what's been put before us to look at tonight. I would say that as I look at my colleagues here in this room, that I see our responsibility being in line with what Board Member Jensen's talking about, but also the second part of it is the resources. And I think that, asking those questions, making sure that we understand, but even just taking what you were just talking about, Brian, and then as you directed us to the page on page 40 to see the implementation starting, next year, the 2023-2024 year, there's like 35 bullets there. And for me as a board member, I want to make sure that we have the resources in order to be able to even take a hack at those 35 bullets, because that's a lot, that we're asking. And so as simplistic as, adding 20 minutes into a language arts curriculum, as Dr. Hall said, where does the professional development money come from? How do we do that? You started to talk about that a little bit, Superintendent Bates. So, as I look at this, Alan, I guess that the question that I want to ask our business administrator overall is, what do you see the process and the timeline for it to come back to the board to talk about how we allocate those resources to the student achievement plan?
So for current year, what I see, because we have two things that are running parallel right now, is the budget preparation and then this document. So for the budget book that we're going to present and approve in June, not much there. We're kind of going status quo with that. There may be a few things added, but largely status quo. And then throughout the year, as we do budget revisions, we will bring proposals to the board saying, in order for us to meet this goal, here are the resources where we are requesting, and here's where we'll get those resources, or if it needs to be some additional resources, and we'll have those discussions. Not every board meeting, but my guess is it's going to be more than one board meeting.
So thank you so much, because that speaks to the living document of the student achievement plan, but also our budget, knowing that we need to make adjustments. I would just hope that as a board, because I think this is a lot, 35 plus bullets for one at the implementation, that we'd be willing to work with, our administrators, the men and women who put this together, that it's not a burden, that if things need to come back, then they need to come back and they need to be readjusted. Because I don't think there is any way that we can look into a crystal ball. We can't shake that 8 ball and say what's going to happen. We just don't know. So I appreciate you saying it's a living document. I appreciate that Alan is also seeing our budget that way also, because we just don't know for sure what's on the horizon. But I just think that I don't take this lightly. I think that this is one of the biggest, one of the top priorities that we have as board members as far as the direction of our district and where it's going.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I'll try not to be redundant because some of these are related. But so I'm looking at page 23, which is about aligning pre-K with the district. And on the implementation plan, it says, you know, we will provide coaching and support in XYZ subject areas. And I guess the thing I'm curious about in the plan as it moves forward, like I think we should move it forward. There's a lot of good content. But as we look at how it continues to evolve, some of these things need to be communicated to principals, and some things like pre-K have not been on-site managed, right? So I look at the communication plan and think, like, how does the implementation of this get communicated through different channels as each prong, like, goes through a different route? So we can say how it's going to get there, but how it does, like, I think we need a clear way to follow up on that and be able to talk about it. And the only other thing I would ask we, like, consider before we move it forward is the impacts of potential reconsolidation on the first year of implementation. Like, there are certain things that I think are reasonable asks in the implementation plan for year one, but may feel less reasonable with the weight of reconsolidation that changes a lot of what we're doing. So I think we should move this forward as something comprehensive. I see like a lot of good feedback implemented in it from everybody, from all of our conversations, but how it continues to evolve, I think, needs to emphasize who communicates these implementation strategies to who, and what are the different workflows that that goes through, and how would that change with reconsolidation?
Thank you, Board Member Anderson.
I make just an observation.
Sure.
I've worked in 4 school districts and have seen these kinds of plans, and can I tell you, I've never seen this level of collaboration between folks in creating a plan that's actually going to be implemented. I've seen a lot of plans. When we first talked about calling this a strategic plan, I think I dismayed Sandra because I don't like the term strategic planning. I was involved with strategic planning in the 80s, and we said, I prefer strategic acting over strategic planning. Strategic planning seems to be that you get together and everybody comes up with some consensus language that everybody can agree to, which means it doesn't say anything. And this is not a plan that these folks have put together so they can check a box and say the plan's done. This is one that really has substance and meat to it, and I just want to really commend the group that which is everybody here that worked together to put this. We keep saying living document because it's not done, and we know it's not done, and this conversation's really helpful. We would ask, I'm not intending to push this, it is a discussion item, we would ask that you help us, put the stake in the ground and say, okay, now we'll approve this piece, now go forward and continue on with what you keep promising. Because I think this really is an exciting opportunity to direct, for you to direct the education in the Salt Lake City School District. So, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Board. Would certainly echo the gratitudes that are deserved. And with that, you said it perfectly, Superintendent. I would look for a motion to move this to the action agenda.
So moved.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion that we haven't already had? Okay. Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Bade.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes. And now I will look for a motion to approve the strategic plan for student achievement.
I move that we approve the student achievement plan.
Have a motion by Board Member Sweat. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Christy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Jensen.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
That motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, district. Thank
Yes,
you, Dr.
congratulations.
Congratulations, everyone. This is exciting.
It's very exciting. All right. The last item on our discussion agenda is some superintendent search discussion and some updates.
That's a lot.
I'll go ahead and hand out a handout that will certainly be attached to our minutes. Just wait for that to go around. So as you all know, through email correspondence, last week, Vice President Williams, myself, Superintendent Bates met with Richard Stoll, who's the representative from USBA helping us with this process of hiring a new superintendent. There are some elements in that correspondence that we'll talk about tonight, specific to a lot of work that needs to be done between now and May 2nd, which is our proposed target date that we've kind of settled on. And I would turn it over to Superintendent Bates to carry on the discussion from here.
Thank you. I think everybody's got this before you. There are three, let's say, three entities that have things to do. First, the Board of Education. There's a list of tasks. There are the stakeholder appointees with the task, and there's the staff with the task. Everybody oriented on what I'm describing there? Okay. Let me go through these tasks. Let me start with Board of Education. There's a task to invite and then submit appointees, and I think what we've said is 2 to 3 appointees from every board member. And I've heard from most, but not all. And thank you those who have submitted names and said these. We've talked to these people. They would be willing to commit a day or so to doing this work. I think I sent some language that you could use as you give those invitations. Let's come back to the day time thing.
Can I just ask, was it 2 that you wanted, or was it 3, or there was some question on that, and so. There was.
I
thought it was 2.
Some board members submitted 2 and others submitted 3, and so as we discussed that, we'd say, well, maybe 2 or 3. So if you only submitted 2 and you'd like to submit a third, submit a third.
Okay, thank you.
And if you, so that's.
I just thought we had to clarify that.
Yeah. And Superintendent, if I could insert just real quickly here, along with the appointees that we're submitting, there's also the discussion that we've had about student representation and other stakeholders from the community, such as the mayor, other folks that are connected to our district, if it's through the Ed Foundation or donors or businesses that we're connected with, those could also be potentials as well. But I personally think just the relationship that we have with the city, that it would make a lot of sense to have the mayor participate in this review and ranking of our applications as well.
So yes, the mayor, the president of each of the employee associations we had discussed, and then there is some back and forth on students, and I don't know where that discussion ended up. But so inviting and then submitting those appointees. Let's look at the date in a minute. Let me go down the tasks first, and you'll see. I think some of these can be done on the same day, but just picture with me as I walk through these and discuss these what it would be that's happening. Developing and approving the contract. I've asked Christina and Joan to put together a draft superintendent contract. So there would be a time then when that would come here to the board, and we would discuss those terms to make sure so we have a firm understanding of what what those terms are, if something needs to be added, if we want to do. So that would be something for the board to do, and the draft's being worked on. Determine selection strategy and questions. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, I sent out to all of you I think 114 questions that have been asked previously. That may be too many to ask of each candidate. That was tongue-in-cheek. But what we ought to have a conversation about, what do we really want to know about this person? What do we really want to know about this person, and what's the best way to find that out? That's what I mean when we say here, that's what I'm thinking when we say selection strategy and questions. And we can, we should meet and schedule a meeting where as a board we sit down and talk that through, talk that strategy through, talk those questions through. Then the applications will come in. So that right now the closing date, if you will, is March 31st. So March 31st at 4:01, Richard will have the complete applications for those who have completed their applications. He's anticipating people calling at 4:02 and saying, hey, can I finish this tomorrow? And the thought is, do we want you as a superintendent if you can't meet a deadline that's clear like that? So anyway, so he'll package that at 4:02 or whatever that is. So you as a board will want to review all of those applications. You as a board will also want to review the stakeholder evaluations and their rankings. That's a point kind of over to the stakeholder appointees and their task. I'll get back to that in a minute. Then you'll want to determine the interviewees. Now, it seems to me that you'll want to take some time reviewing the applications and reviewing the stakeholder work, and that deciding who to interview, that might be a different meeting, a different conversation. Holding the interviews. If you decide to interview, let's say 5 or 6 people, interviews may be an hour long. That could be a full day, and so you'll need to decide what full day that will be. Then you'll want to get together after those interviews are done and review those interviews. Then you'll want to you'll identify, I don't know, 2, 3 perhaps from those whom you interviewed that you're strongly considering that you'd like to interview again, and then there would need to be reference checks. And you see this under the Board of Education. I'd suggest that maybe as a whole board, you call some supervisors and say, hey, tell us about this person. We're considering that would be something that the board would do. I say final reference check because as you look over under staff, there would be a preliminary reference check, and I think that would happen right about the same time that the applications all come together. Then there would be second interviews, and then after the second interviews, you as a board meet and you decide who is it that we want to appoint. And then that appointment is there on March 2nd. So now bouncing over just to the other column, so the stakeholder appointees, we'd anticipate that once those application packets are all received, Richard will we will know at that point how many appointees we have. Let's say there's 20. 7 times 3 is 21. Let's say there's 25 to 30. He'll make that many packets, and then I will contact them and say, here's this week, this first week of April. Pick a day. Tell me a day when you could come in. They'll come in. They won't do this work as a group. They'll do this as individuals. And we'll give you your packet. There's a rubric for every candidate, and we'll spread them out all over this office, where they can spend the time going through those packets, and those will then be put together. And we're looking at the first week of August for that to be April, that to be completed, so that I'm back to August and those board meeting dates we were talking about before. So then first week of April. And that has to happen obviously before you can review their work, which is how these timings come together. And then the staff, that preliminary reference check, I mentioned that a minute ago, I think that comes right about the same time. That's before you start reviewing applicants, so you would have some information that we've gathered. And preliminary, that's like going on the internet and Googling these folks' names and seeing what pops up, if anything. I took the initiative perhaps to list all of the Tuesdays between now and May 2nd, and I also was presumptuous and indicated that May 9th and May 16th are Tuesdays as well. Some of these days, as you get together, you may decide, you know what, let's do this on a Wednesday, or let's do this on a Friday. That's completely up to you. But are there questions about these tasks and their flow and how I've just described those?
I have some questions. So, once the applications come in and they are brought to you, Nate, is that correct?
I believe they come to Richard first, and
Well, Richard, of course, would get them because that's where they are going, right? All the
Right.
applications are going to Richard.
Right.
And then they're coming to you and to Bryce
which would immediately come to us as a whole.
as a whole, right? And then from that point, it goes to the stakeholder group? Is that?
Let me, here's my understanding. So let's say the stakeholder group has 25 appointees. So Richard will make 25 copies of all of the applications, one for each of them, but then he'll also make 7 more copies. So
Right.
he'll make 32 copies, and he'll bring all of those, and he'll probably bring them here to the office. And so they'll be on April's desk or on my desk, and that would be a pretty good time for us to hold a meeting and hand those out to each other, so that everybody gets them. The stakeholders, the stakeholders won't take them with them. The stakeholders will come here to the district on the day that they've said they've been able to come in that first week of April. And either April or I will camp out in this room and watch them spread out at their desks, and we'll do our work from here while they're doing their evaluation. They're not going to take those with them.
So those will not be provided to them where they could go at their home and take them. They'll be here at the district office, and obviously it's not going to be something that they're going to be communicating with each other. They're going to be individually ranking and then turning those back into the superintendent. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then from that point, that comes back to us as a board. Is that right?
Correct.
Then, so the rankings that will just be a determination of what we want that process to be. Is that right? Is that what I'm trying to understand. You're getting this ranking from them.
The stakeholders will say, these are my top 5 in order.
Well, okay, you didn't say that. Okay, so.
Yeah, so that's what it is.
So that's what you're going to say, is that we're going to look at the top 5 in order?
No, you will look at all of them.
Okay.
But you'll also see the feedback from the 25. So we can take the 25 rankings
Right.
and say, you know what? Of the 25, 17 of them have these 3, 1, 2, and 3. And then there's so we'll look at those stakeholder rankings and look for patterns that they see, that they're seeing.
And tell me who the "we" is.
You guys.
Okay, so I'm just trying to.
Yep.
Trying
No,
to
this is-
grasp what
this
you're
is you
talking
guys.
about.
I'll hand
Yeah,
it.
I'm just trying to grasp what you're talking about, so that at a board meeting, we would be here, we would be looking at that.
Yep.
Obviously, is that in a
Closed
closed
session.
meeting?
Yes.
Right, in a closed session? So that we would be able to look at the applications, look at whatever the rankings are, and then at that point, make a determination of who we wanted to interview.
Who and how many do you want to interview? How many and whom?
And we don't anticipate anything being public relative to the candidates until interviews.
Until the interviews. So non-disclosures are signed, right? Those are turned in to us, and then at that point, making that determination would be done in a closed session with the board members.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand
this
what
is
your
perfect.
pattern
This is
is
perfect.
here.
These are all the.
So that once we determine the interviews, and I'm just going to use the example that Richard used, that if it's not a large group of people, then would we have to have second interviews?
That would be up to you.
That would be up to the board, right? Okay.
If you interview, let's say there are 8 applicants,
Right.
and you
Then
decide to interview all 8 of them.
Right.
Because my 5, I'm just pulling that out of the year. Let's say you decide to interview all 8 of them, and when you're done interviewing all 8, you say, you know what, we know who we want. We don't need to invite them back. Let's just, well, at that point, and then I'll say, slow down. Let's get on the phone. When I say let's, you guys get on the phone and call their current
have to
board
do
president,
their-
or call their whomever, or maybe it's
Sleep on
somebody
it.
you know, and then you don't feel like you need to do that. But that's what you'll decide. Do we want to have a second round, or that's up, and there's ambiguity here because we don't know who or how many are going to apply.
Okay.
And so some of that these are placeholders, but some of it we're going to have to nail down
Right.
when we have the actual substance.
So I want to just go back to the stakeholder appointments. Would that be all right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So when we look at the stakeholder appointments, walk me through how you see those letters going out for invitation. Should it be from the Board of Education that letter goes out to all? You generate a list of our employee groups, whoever else we want to add on to that, and then a letter goes out with information about what day it is. I mean, walk me through that
Yes.
so I
Yes.
understand.
Yeah. My assumption, and I think you've all done this to this point, is to say, I'd like you to be a representative for me on this committee. And then you've sent me their contact information, so I can call them. There's a president of one of our associations right there. So I can call James. This is an example. Okay, don't put it in your calendar yet, James. But I can say, James, you remember we've been talking about this committee. You've heard about this committee from the board member. I'm the superintendent, giving you a call. Thank you so much for your willingness. We have those applicants. There are 18 of them. There are 12 of them. There are 9 of them. And they've got packets. We've scheduled the first week of April. These are those dates. Is there one of those when you could come in and review those applications? And he'll get out his whatever, and he'll say, yeah, I could come in on I don't even know what the dates are that week. I could come in on the 4th, and I'll say, great, please come in at the front desk. Elizabeth is there. She'll get you to April. April will hand you the packet. She'll have you sign the non-disclosure document, and then she'll get you a workspace where you can stay as long as you'd like. And then he's got in his calendar, April and I've got in our calendar, James is coming on this date, and we're available from 8 to however long you'd like to stay. So I'd probably think about doing that by phone call, just to answer any other questions that they might have, rather than having the back and forth on I can come at this time or I can come at that time.
So my suggestion, I'm thinking that, because I'm thinking even if 2 of us, I mean, if we put in 2 names, let's say you put in 2, that's 14 just from the board, 21 if you have 3, then you're going to add in everybody else. I'm just wondering if it wouldn't just be better to come up with, your talking points, and that it's split between the 3 of you, that it's Nate and Bryce and you that are making those phone calls,
Yeah.
To be a little bit more
We can be efficient. We'll work that out.
So that it's, I think it's important that the people hear from Nate and Bryce that they're a part of that too, and that you're an emissary for the board. I think that's important that they know that too. So that helps me understand the stakeholder part of it, of because I couldn't provide any of that information. I didn't know, if it was going to be something where we would send a protected file, and a non-disclosure to them personally, but it sounds like that you're talking about
Richard's recommendation is that they come in here and that they never actually leave the building with those documents.
with any of that. That makes sense.
Feel differently about the 7 of you, but you're elected and you took an oath of office.
Yeah.
And as opposed to folks who come in and sign the document, we keep those in the building.
So just one last question about the student board member. So I think that as far as the non-disclosure goes, that it needs to probably be 18 and older. Is that correct? Did we land on that for sure?
We haven't, but that was the suggestion that I made in the email that I sent you all last week. And the thought was, and I'm not sure if Bryce, you had a chance to talk to Lydia or not yet, but the thought was that Lydia ideally would be the representative from West, and that she would recruit an East and Highland representative as well, who are 18 years of age.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Go for it.
And say that I think that we have more than three high schools. And so I think that it would be important for us to reach out to Innovations and to Horizonte and to SLCSD. You know, I think that it would be important to have that representation.
Perfect. We went back and forth on that.
Yeah.
We would love that. Lydia?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hi, sorry. I would love, I think, for what board member Sweat said about representation from Innovations or Horizonte. One thought is that I'm not 18, so I wouldn't be able to sign, or I guess I'm not 18, if that affects anything.
Lydia, I think we could make a special exception based on the responsibilities that you've committed to for our student board member position.
Okay, perfect. Then I think that sounds great. And I've already talked to a few students, but I guess just depending on what we decide about Horizonte or Innovations or SLCSD, expanding the students I'm talking to about that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, and again, we will need to make a decision about all of that, and seems like there's some support.
So we are not making invitations to the students. We've just determined how we're going to get the students represented through Lydia.
Lydia's going to make it.
Lydia's going to do it.
Okay, Lydia?
That sounds great.
So here, let's
Wanted to make
let's
sure
set
she
a
understood
let's set a date, and so Lydia, you've got your pencil out, I'm sure. So
yeah,
to invite and submit to me the appointees. Today is I don't even know what today is.
7th.
Today's the 7th. If you could all get those to me, are we okay by next Tuesday?
Yeah.
that should work for me. Am I supposed to find people from the SLCSD, Innovations, and Horizonte?
Yes, and
Have we made a
Lydia,
decision on that?
I will send you an email, Lydia, with some talking points that might help you as you're extending those invitations. Does that sound good?
And Superintendent Bates, before Dr. Taylor walks out of the
Thank
room,
you.
sorry, Dr. Taylor, I think you could be a huge connection point for Lydia through your position with the area directors to the other high schools that we have.
The high schools.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'll have his contact information, Dr. Taylor's contact information in that email as well, Lydia, and so he can help you with some of those where you might not know students in those particular schools.
And she doesn't know if they're 18.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry?
She doesn't know if they're 18. She's going to have help with that.
Well, she can ask them if they're 18.
Oh, okay.
That's yeah, you can, yeah, that we'd like them to be 18, Lydia.
Okay.
All right. All right, so we just said the 14th, so the 14th, if you could get to me, if all of you by the 14th of March, the appointees. Then it seems to me that the next two, developing and approving the contract and determining selection strategy and questions, that could be done at the same time.
I agree.
Is there a date that that works for everyone that and that?
Can't we do that on the 21st? At our next meeting?
We could. So as Martin mentioned, we've had some outreach with Joan and with Christina, and when I talked with Joan, I said we need to have at least a final draft sometime in April for the board to review
Right.
the contract.
If we, so just going to make a suggestion.
Please.
I think that what was helpful, and Christina was a part of that, was to have the previous contract used, that we can look at, and that could be sent to us easily, and that would prepare us for the meeting for the 21st, and also I think that we have the questions that have been used in the past, but if either of those documents could be forwarded to us, that would be a starting point, for us, at least to have that, and then be able to talk about, the both of those in our next meeting.
Right. And those are both elements that we've talked about. I know Christina and Joan, that's on their radar based on the conversations Superintendent Bates and I have had with both of them. The questions are a little more tricky because I believe those are owned by the previous consultant. So a lot of the work and the stuff that we had.
The questions that I emailed out to you those are from Richard.
Those are from Richard.
Yeah, those are from Richard, and I think that we might as well, I would say use those because they've been vetted and used,
And I'd suggest you use those as prompts.
Yep.
But that you develop your own strategy,
develop
your
your
specific
own,
one.
how you wanna
But you
do
use
that.
those as this is, as prompts, as ideas for directions to go.
So on the 21st, we could use that as our study session, right? What do we have scheduled for the 21st right now? I can't remember. You sent us that agenda, didn't you?
Yes, we did. Let me pull it up.
It's a couple of things. Well, one is a fee schedule.
The fee schedule, right?
Hearing. Which
It seemed like it wasn't very heavy, that there wasn't.
And then, granted, some of these conversations, especially relative to the contract, will be handled in closed session.
There's the report, Paul, on the not feasibility, viability. Pardon? Yes, Fourth High School Financial and Population Viability Report. It's not virtual elementary options, it's virtual school options. Just to give a teaser, there is continuing interest in synchronous, or in any event, a virtual elementary offering. The demand has diminished. The challenge I talked about this at the last meeting, the challenge we're facing is because it's a school, we can't make adjustments to the program that diminish it out of being a school. So there are a number of options that we'd like to talk to you about that are really available, and look for your direction on how to move forward if really we want to continue providing synchronous / asynchronous virtual opportunities for elementary students. And there are a number of options that we'd like to discuss with you, and we'll do that at that next meeting. That's not an hour-long discussion, and neither. So we could have an extended closed session dealing with these items if that were the desire on the 21st.
Okay.
So I'm writing that in on the 21st. Then we jump forward to, the NLTs here, that's no later than. So the board review of applications. Now we are in Orlando on that first, what is that, Monday the 2nd? And then there are several board members, is it the 2nd? There are several board members that won't be back in town until the 3rd or the 4th. And I don't know how long it's going to take Richard to make those copies. But we could distribute to the board those applications also in that first week of April. And then you would have those, you'd sign your own non-disclosure, and then I think you could have those to review at your convenience. So I'm going to say first week of April there again. Is that working?
You're saying that for review applications? Is that?
and maybe we cross out review and say receive, so you receive the applications
Yeah.
the first week of April.
Yeah. Is that the review part?
So, but then you would sit down, then I think you do have a meeting. So Richard will bring those to me, to us, and maybe Christie, this is a little bit different than what we were saying before. As you are able, you come to the district office and pick up your packet of applications.
Oh, of the application.
That make,
Yeah, whatever you
that-
want us to do, yeah.
okay, so when we have those, we would let you know, and then you could come get them at your convenience.
So you're thinking he's going to have them ready to be here on, well, he'll be in Orlando too.
He will, won't he?
Yeah, so he won't be doing anything from.
His
being
office
able-
will. Does he bring everybody
Well,
with him?
Julie, I don't know, because Julie's only part-time. So I don't know, you'll have to.
Okay, so we'll have to, so there's a
Kate
little
can
bit
call
of
him and
float there.
talk to him about
But
that. Yeah.
we've got 3 weeks to work that. So we'll get that as soon as we can. That plays over into that same stakeholder appointee conversation. So I'll need to hear from Richard how quickly he can get those.
So can we not schedule then April 11th as that review with all of us together? Is that?
We could.
If we get it and we see it,
If we
then
get it
could
and we
just
get
do-
it back from the stakeholders.
Right.
So April 11th,
April 11th is our board meeting, so we could, is that right?
uh-huh.
Yeah, we could potentially,
So we need the stakeholders to be done by April 11th as well. Okay, so then,
oh, the 18th.
but we can schedule the 11th is what we're saying.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, wait, I better make sure that I'm here.
Let's keep working this down and see if it ends by May 2nd.
Before you go on, can I just ask one question? You were talking about the other stakeholders, like the mayor and...
Here's who I have listed.
Okay, so I wanted to know who makes that decision? Is
Yeah.
Nate making that decision, or you making that decision? What is it that...
We'll do it together.
How are we... I just want to know how we're coming up with our other stakeholders.
Here's,
We never...
and I've just penciled these down as we've been talking. This is the conversation we've been having for several months. The mayor,
Okay.
the SLEA president, so the president of the associations, that's the SLEA president, the SLASA president, help me now, there's the 4 classified presidents. So those are the employee, that's the mayor, the employee groups. Then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 students.
Okay.
And then your appointees, these 7 and those 6.
So I don't want to throw a curveball, but I want to ask a question. So as I'm thinking about the relationship, with the city, I don't necessarily always go right to the mayor. I mean, I'm thinking about the city council, that if you wanted to have somebody from the council who is who we meet with, and regularly it's the superintendent who meets with the mayor, that to see if there was a council member that would possibly rather be in that place instead of the mayor. But talk me out of that, or talk to me, as to why you think that the mayor would be in a better person to sit on that stakeholder group than, Jennifer, who is the liaison for both. I don't want to give you another thing to do, Jennifer, but I'm just thinking
Let me give that a try, and
Yeah.
I've got to,
We asked the
I'm
same question.
just laying right out on the table, I'm not used to working with only one city.
Right.
And my experience has been with 7 cities and the county. So I don't know, are there 7 city council people?
Yes.
So would we choose one of them, or ask them to choose 2 of them?
And see, for
Or do we
me-
just say, hey, the mayor represents everybody?
So for me personally, I think the neutral person is Jennifer. That would be my choice, to sit in that seat representing the city, because she's liaisoning between the mayor's office and also, the city council. We did that with Ricky when Ricky was here with us. And it works nicely because it's a neutral person. you know, that, anyway, that would be my suggestion. Instead of looking at trying to pick 2 city council people or the mayor, I totally understand, and I'm fine with whatever the rest of the board wants to do. I just wanted to ask the question.
And then the question in my, I'm fine with Jennifer. Is the city leadership
Right.
fine with Jennifer representing them? That's the question. Maybe that's a conversation to have with the mayor and see how she would feel about if she likes that thinking too. I don't want to wait for the city council to have a meeting and discuss it.
No, yeah, I understand that.
And for me, you know, having a mayor, because she will be the one meeting face to face with the superintendent, and having her as a person who will be looking at those, you know, applications, I think it's much more advantageous because, you know, their input. This is a person from a city who, you know, going to be working with someone who is representing school district in their city, and it just makes sense that if a mayor is there, there's going to be more like, you know, a bit of a deeper looking into the application in terms of what they are looking for.
Should we ask the mayor?
I had a preliminary conversation pending board approval. I let her know that that was very specific, that the board still has to decide ultimately what that representation looks like. So she's open. She would love the opportunity to participate. She also floated the idea of having Jen help her with that process as well. So it really is up to us and how we want to manage that. It could be the mayor herself. It could be Jen. It could be the mayor and maybe the president of the city council, the chair of the city council, just to make it easier on us since we're inviting the presidents of employee groups in the district. I'm just floating some ideas, but nothing's been promised or guaranteed. I know. This is the fun part.
Yeah.
Collaboration.
We have to figure this out.
Yes, we do.
So we can move ahead.
Yep.
And I'm sorry that I took us back to stakeholders.
No,
but-
that's.
Okay.
No, I think
It's important.
it's a smart question.
Yeah.
So after the 11th, when you've reviewed stakeholder evaluations and rankings, and you've had opportunity to review the applications yourselves, you'll need to determine whom you want to interview. I can imagine that being a not a 2-hour conversation, but that could well be a lengthy conversation as the 7 of you bring your thoughts and your reviews to the table and say, who is it that we want to interview? So should we schedule, I think we should schedule a meeting for that conversation.
So could that also be done on the 18th, our next meeting?
That could.
April 18th?
April 18th.
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, do that in,
Then you'll conduct the interviews.
And this is the
This is the hard one.
the long day.
Now, you know what? I've had this discussion with Nate and Bryce, so I apologize. Can I throw you guys a curveball?
Yes.
Maybe we hold off until the 18th to schedule those dates, because again, we won't know how many people, from here on down, we don't know how many people there are. We don't know, there's a lot of things we don't know, and to nail that down, but I do think we've got more than 2 weeks between the 18th and May 2nd. So we've still got time to schedule 2 sets of interviews if that's what we want to do, but rather than do that now when there are still some unknowns, is that
Sure.
is that a
Sounds good.
That works. And I also wonder, just maybe in the interest of time and in the future and tonight, I know we've also talked about potentially just adopting all of these dates and utilizing the ones that we need. And if we don't need them, we can cancel them and publicly notice that, just to be safe.
that's a great idea. We could notice every one of these dates as a 5 o'clock meeting. With
Yeah.
the ones that aren't already scheduled.
so may I ask, not ask, but request, so Brian and I have a retreat it's our work meeting for USBA that starts on the 20th of April and goes until the 22nd. So if we can do a little moratorium, if we can't, then just know that, I mean, we'd have to make other arrangements. You know, we'd probably not be able to attend, because I don't think we could do the interviews virtually. I don't know. Just know that that's,
Okay.
I mean, if
Well,
we have
if-
to work
if-
around that, or if possible.
Yeah, and if we adopt these, you would have that week window between
Yeah.
the 18th and the 25th.
Right.
There doesn't need to be a lot of time between the first and second interviews. If you just, that could be, I mean, you could do the first interviews on Tuesday. When those interviews are done, stick around for another hour and say, hey, these are the two we want to interview. Let's interview them on Friday. And then you're good to go again. But so we're crossing out the 20th through the 22nd to preserve that for the.
Yeah.
Are we in a good place? Does this make sense to?
It does.
To folks?
Do you need us to move to approve these dates?
We would, because they would need to be publicly noticed.
So what dates are we going to do? This whole list right here?
Yes.
Okay, hang on. So the 14th, we'll need to notice the 14th. The 21st is already a meeting. We don't have anything for the 28th of March. We don't have anything for the 4th of March. The 11th is no, the 11th is not a meeting, so we need to notice the 11th. The 18th is a meeting.
It is a meeting.
The 25th is not a meeting, and May 2nd is a meeting. So we could go to that point. That's just adding meetings on March 14th, April 11th, and April 25th.
I move that we notice meetings on March 14th, April 11th, and 25th.
Second.
As needed.
May I ask for a point of clarification to have this moved to the action agenda first?
To the action agenda.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote starting with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Chrissy Sweat, yes.
All right, that motion carries. I'll look for a motion to approve these dates now that it's on the action agenda.
I move to approve these dates.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Board Member Jensen, could we get a little more specific on the dates for the record?
I move to approve the dates March 14th, April 18th.
11th.
Or April 11th, April 25th.
That's right.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Sika.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you for the discussion. I think there are some elements of all of these needs doing items that we can filter in more specifically. As we discuss that with Richard and board leadership superintendent.
Yep.
And we'll certainly be sending those details out
Good, very good.
in the future. Are there any other details that we want to discuss tonight? I know there's some kind of loose ends relative to the stakeholder committee and that communication with the mayor or the city council. Do we want to finalize that tonight, or do we want to let that rest for a little bit longer, let that sink in and address it at the next meeting?
That wasn't my question.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to know, has the brochure gone out?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, we heard that it was going to be sent. Anyway, I never heard that it had been. So it's out there in the public domain.
usba.cc.
Yep.
I invite you to send that out to whomever you'd like, but to also go look at it yourselves. And you go in, you scroll down till it says openings, and what I've been telling people is that go to usba.cc, scroll down to employment opportunities, ignore the other 3 superintendent positions that are available, and just click on ours. That's precisely what I've been telling people. And there's considerable excitement. There really is.
Well, thank you, because I've had people ask me, and I haven't, okay, usba.cc.
Yep,
Okay.
and then scroll down to, it's on the,
Yeah, it's
it's
on
a
there.
long homepage,
Long
but
list.
scroll down to employment opportunities. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further discussion that we need?
I don't
to
think
tackle
so,
as a
and I don't
board?
have
Okay.
anything to report.
All right. Any board member reports that we have?
I have one, sorry.
No
I have
worries.
2 little things. So the Board Handbook Committee is going to be meeting on March 20th at 1 p.m. That's been scheduled. So if you have been, late night reading the handbook and you have suggestions, and send them forward to us.
I appreciate that.
The Finance Committee did meet, and we met on the 15th, and we discussed the internal audit. We also looked at just what that looks like, getting an internal audit. Did I say that right? Internal auditor, which is a new thing that we have not done. Also that it can't be a member of the district or an administrator or an employee, right? The internal.
Yes.
Yes, and we need to look for someone who's completely independent. Of me and my finance team.
Yep. So that will be a change. And go ahead.
Yeah, so what we're looking for is beginning a procurement process to get those services done within the next month or so. Get that out on the street so we can start that process, which will require funding.
Yeah.
But this was as a result of the legislative audit, just pointing out where we needed to strengthen our internal audit function.
We had a great report from Christy Hart about the internal audits that's been going on, and so we were able to hear what she had to tell us and then look forward to next year, those audits. And then we were just briefed on the upcoming topics, that we'll be hearing about with the health insurance costs and the premiums and the need to possibly change from being self-insured, correct? No? Okay, tell me again. I thought it was...
No, just change possibly makeup
Oh,
of
that's
the
right.
plan
The makeup
or
of the
ways
plan.
we can address the shortfalls we
Because
currently
we can continue to be self-insured.
We don't want to
Correct.
stop being
We
self-insured.
don't want to stop being self-insured.
We wanna
There we
continue
go. Okay, and I think that's it. I have there's an executive summary that will be attached to our minutes, that you'll be able to read through if you're interested. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Board Member Jensen, did you have a?
I do. I need to report on the USBA Board of Directors meeting on the 16th. Remind you, tomorrow, there's going to be a regional meeting. You're invited to that. Then, when we are in Orlando, USBA will be hosting a Sunday ice cream sundae, and you and your families are invited to that if you would like to attend. Then the USBA wants us to stress the importance of attending and participating in our local caucus meetings, and those are going to be occurring in the near future. And when you're participating, you got to keep those conversations going with with our legislators, and then also let them know about the training that we're getting through that Master Board certification, to let them know that we really are working to be trained to give them feedback on education bills. And then they did change the USBA pre-delegate assembly and delegate assembly. The new dates for these two meetings are August 25th at 6 p.m. and August 26th at 8:30 a.m. And the location will still be at the Canyons District Office. So that's a change of dates there. And then I just wanted to celebrate Clayton Middle School. They're performing their annual school play, and it's Matilda. I went last night. It's wonderful, as they always are. It's amazing to see 200 students up there on the stage. The finale. What a wonderful way for children to be able to participate, and it also is a great way to bring students back to our district. And there are people that want their children to have those opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you, Board Member Jensen. Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, just really quickly, I'd say to the Bryant student who spoke, I think her name was Lillian, that Wasatch Elementary, pretty much, across the street, does use a program with Momentum for food waste. And so I hope Bryant could learn from the model Wasatch is using to move that idea forward. And to congratulate West High Debate on their regional win, and also their theater group for their performance of Murder on the Orient Express, which was very fun. And I took a bunch of 3rd and 6th graders who were very excited to discover the ending to that play. So congratulations to West.
Thank you, Board Member Harrison. Vice President Williams?
I don't have a report this week.
Board Member Sika?
Nope, we're good.
All right. Board Member Bay?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say happy Women's Month. As I reflect in our life, without women, none of us here will be in this world. And if there were more women in leadership, I think the world would be a better place and a safer place, hands down. And to all the women, wherever you may be, I just want to, I salute you for everything you do. That's from me to all of you. And also, my heart goes out to the families who lose their loved ones, especially, school-age children. And let's continue to remind ourselves as we continue to fund that we prioritize mental health and anything that we can do to help reduce the fatality of our little ones. As a parent, that would be a nightmare. Words are not enough to express it. And imagine if that's a family member or a sibling. So, and also, in about 14 days, the month of Ramadan will begin. And that's a holy month where Muslims fast for 30 days from sunrise to sunset. And if, you have colleagues, teachers, and so make sure you recognize them during that holy month. And also, if we have teachers who are Muslims, that we make sure our district does everything possible to accommodate those families, those students, and those teachers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. The only thing that I would add with my report is, we talked about the retreat last time in our last board meeting. Bryce and I had the thought that while we want to push the retreat to a later date after we have a new superintendent appointed and hired, that it would be good to filter in some of the trainings that were on that document. And one of the ones that we felt like was most made the most sense to have sooner than later is the Robert's Rules of Order training. We had the experience at the President and Vice President training at the Nebo School District offices with Rob Smith, who's a business administrator at another school district here. He would love the opportunity to come and work with us. We were thinking of potentially either this month or the month of April to have that taken care of, but if folks are good with that, we think it'd be a good training for us to refresh our skills and then also reintroduce some new skills to our new board members. So if folks are okay with that, we can get that rolling. Everybody okay? Okay. Thanks, everybody, and I will call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you. All right.
said 8:15, I lost that by 14 minutes.
Yeah, you did.
Nate,
Yes.
would you like a copy of this that came from that other school board?
That'd be
Did you
great.
guys, yeah, I wondered if you guys got it or not.
I
What
don't
was
think
that?